Blissful Bookshelf. Chapter 345. Jiang Xi, do you think Yan Jiufeng can pass? Mu Ning couldn't help but ask. Probably, maybe. I don't know. Jiang Xi smiled. What a load of nonsense. Mu Ning snorted. 5 minutes later, Yan Jiufeng flew back from the sky-piercing mountain. The lively girl in the red dress had a tense expression on her face. You didn't pass? Mu Ning asked. Sigh, it's too difficult. Yan Jiufeng smiled helplessly. Too difficult. Those words made the hearts of the geniuses sink. If even Yan Jiufeng said it was difficult, then they had even less of a chance. At this moment, the Lord Guardian shouted, the Void Universe sky-piercing mountain is empty. Those who have chosen the Void Universe altar, go ahead. Whoosh! A figure flew out and attracted everyone's attention. It was Ji Wei. If even Ji Wei can't pass, then it's too difficult. Jiang Xi frowned. Those who weren't challenging the mountain were waiting for Ji Wei's result. At the same time, the geniuses who had gone to challenge the other sky-piercing mountains were also flying back. Basically, the time they spent was around 2 minutes, and they failed. 1 minute, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, Ji Wei still hadn't come down. Ji Wei has passed the first stage. The Lord Guardian suddenly smiled. Everyone was shocked. Ji Wei was indeed strong. However, Ji Wei's success gave everyone hope. It wasn't impossible to pass the first stage. After another 10 minutes, the Lord Guardian smiled and said, as expected of a genius rarely seen in a million years. He has passed the second stage. Hiss, everyone wasn't shocked. They all sucked in a breath of cold air. Freak. Even the second place Yan Jiufeng couldn't pass the first stage. Ji Wei had actually passed the second stage. The gap was too big. Everyone felt the pressure. Even geniuses were divided into different levels. Ordinary, peak, peerless. They were only peak geniuses, but Ji Wei was a peerless genius. Even the lively Yan Jiufeng fell silent. Kuang Lang, the third-place genius of the 9 regions genius battle, had an ugly expression on his face. He had tried to challenge the sky-piercing mountain, but he had only lasted for 3 minutes before being defeated. Among the geniuses who had cleared the sky-piercing mountain, this time could be ranked third. But for the arrogant Kuang Lang, he wouldn't allow himself to have such a big gap with others. Why? We're all in the top 3 of the 9 regions genius tournament, and we're all Purple Heaven Sect's 4th Heaven disciples, but he passed the first 2 tests. Kuang Lang clenched his teeth. The other geniuses in the top 10, such as Mo Hong, Blood Child, Li Xianxian, Lin Ling, Feng Lu, and the others, wore complicated expressions. Jiang Xi and Mu Ning looked at each other and smiled bitterly. Another 3 minutes passed, and Ji Wei flew back from the Void Universe sky-connecting mountain expressionlessly. Upon closer inspection, one could see that his brows were slightly furrowed. He stopped at the 3rd stage. After that, Ji Wei didn't linger any longer. His spiritual awareness left the painting and he went back to cultivate. Only then did the others who had cleared the Heavenspan mountain come to their senses. What was the point of wasting time here? With such a huge gap between them, what was the point of watching the show? He might as well cultivate. Instantly, the number of people decreased significantly. No one is challenging the myriad Heavenspan Mountain and Green Lotus Heavenspan Mountain now, the Mountain Keeper's voice sounded. Jiang Xi was talking to Mu Ning and Yan Jiufeng. He was about to go over when he heard the voice. However, he discovered that another genius who cultivated the sword Dao had rushed out before him. Fine, I can observe the situation of the other 8 people. A total of 9 people chose the Green Lotus altar. Jiang Xi didn't insist on who went first. Blissful Bookshelf. Jiang Xi, Yan Jiufeng, I'm going too. Mu Ning said with a determined gaze. Good luck. Good luck. Jiang Xi and Yan Jiufeng said. Then, Mu Ning flew towards the myriad heaven-span mountain. After 5 minutes, Mu Ning still hadn't come out. On the contrary, the 8 sword Dao geniuses who went to challenge the Green Lotus heaven-span mountain failed in succession within 5 minutes. At this speed, they came back down almost as soon as they went up. Looking at the time, Mu Ning should be passing the first round. Jiang Xi took a deep breath and was about to fly towards the Green Lotus heaven-span mountain. Just then, he heard the mountain keeper say with a smile, "This year's geniuses are not bad. Mu Ning has also passed the first round." Fuck. Jiang Xi directly used the Gale domain and accelerated towards the Green Lotus heaven-span mountain. Everyone had a competitive heart. Even the most Buddhist-like people were no exception. No genius would admit defeat easily. The other geniuses' expressions changed drastically. They were even more shocked than when they heard that Ji Wei had passed the first 2 rounds. Because Ji Wei's talent and strength far exceeded theirs, and Mu Ning wasn't in the top 3 of the 9 regions' genius battle. At this moment, Kuang Lang's eyes flickered. It wasn't jealousy, but competitiveness. He was in the top 3 of the 9 regions' genius battle. Why? Jiang Xi also went to challenge the first round. I only lasted 3 minutes in the first round. He should also be in the same time. Kuang Lang took a deep breath. He wanted to see the results of Jiang Xi's challenge. This was because he had fought with Jiang Xi in the 9 regions genius battles arena battles. At that time, the two of them were about the same strength. It was only because he had the advantage of the terrain that he defeated Jiang Xi in the end. Not far away, Yan Jiufeng was closer to Mu Ning and Jiang Xi because of her relationship with them. After the challenge, she didn't leave the sky-piercing mountain and river painting because she wanted to see the results of the two. Mu Ning looks innocent, but he's hiding a lot of things. Jiang Xi's strength is about the same as Kuang Lang's. He probably won't be able to pass the first round, she thought to herself. The other top 10 geniuses didn't leave either. Everyone had a competitive spirit and was unwilling to admit defeat. My Ignis Dao is already perfected. Among so many geniuses, my Dao technique strength is definitely in the top 3. I don't believe I can't pass. With this thought in mind, Jiang Xi quickly arrived at the majestic Green Lotus Skirich mountain. There was a stone tablet at the foot of the mountain. It was very similar to the stone tablet at the Jade Lake Skirich mountain. It was also engraved with ancient words that didn't belong to this era. The content was instantly transmitted to Jiang Xi's mind. Green Lotus Skirich Mountain. Attached, point reward rules. The first round rewards 100 points. The second round rewards 200 points. The third round rewards 400 points. The fourth round, so on and so forth. The points reward would be doubled for every additional round passed. For young geniuses who have just entered the ancient Dao origin world to cultivate, they will receive 10 times the points reward for 30 years. In order, 1,000 points, 2,000 points, 4,000 points. The information on the stone tablet made Riverward pleasantly surprised. Points. 1 point was equivalent to 100 supreme-grade spirit crystals. After spending once in the Purple Heaven Sect's treasure pavilion, he realized the importance of points. He could buy many things in the Purple Heaven Sect's treasure pavilion that couldn't be bought in the outside world. For example, the Origin Awakening Spirit Pearl that he needed to refine his clone was very difficult to buy in the outside world. Chapter 346. Passing the sky-piercing mountain in the newbie stage would give 10 times the points reward. Passing the first stage would give 1,000 points, which was equivalent to 100,000 supreme-grade spirit crystals. This was already the same as the spirit crystal reward for the top 3 in the 9 regions genius battle. From the point reward, one could see how difficult the sky-piercing mountain was. Among so many young geniuses, only Ji Wei and Mu Ning had passed the second and first stages respectively. The difficulty was obvious. Pass the mountain. Jiang Xi's eyes were firm. Whether it was difficult or not, he would pass it first. It might seem like a long process, but it actually took less than a breath's time to go through the information on the stone tablet. Looking up, one could see that there was a stone staircase on the green lotus sky-piercing mountain that led to the top of the mountain. There was a platform at every interval of the stone staircase. Jiang Xi walked up the stairs. The first platform was the first stage. In the depths of Nine Heavens City, other than the 1,000-meter-tall Nine Heavens Palace, there were many other palaces. Additionally, there were also quite a number of palaces, 100 meters tall, surrounding Nine Firmaments Palace. Those were the grotto mansions of some human experts. At this moment, a woman in green flew into one of the palaces on her sword. "Brother Zhongli, don't sleep anymore. Come down and see me." The woman in green frowned and shouted from below a pavilion. "Sai, Ping, I'll call you sister, okay? I've only slept for 300 years, 300 years. You woke me up." A helpless voice sounded from within the pavilion. A young man with long, messy hair and a slovenly appearance walked down from the pavilion. His clothes were unbuttoned, and he held a wine gourd in his hand. "What's the matter?" His eyes were wandering. "No matter what, you were once the famous wine sword immortal in the other realms. Now, you only know how to sleep all day." Immortal Ping had a look of disappointment on her face. "If you have something to say, say it. If not, I'm going upstairs." Wine Sword Immortal was clearly impatient. "The new 9 regions Genius Battles youths are all here. 9 of them have chosen our Green Lotus sect. Come with me." Immortal Ping stated her intentions, boring. "I'm not going." Wine Sword Immortal raised his gourd and took a sip, as if he was hiding something. Immortal Ping sighed in her heart. She knew that her words had poked at Wine Sword Immortal's sore spot. Because the Wine Sword Immortal Zhongli and his Dao companion, Lian Rong, had met each other during the 9 regions Genius battle. And now, the Wine Sword Immortal was still here, but his Dao companion was gone. This great change caused the Wine Sword Immortal, who had dominated the 9 regions and slaughtered the immortal Dao experts of the 10,000 races in the extraterritorial battlefield, to fall into depression until today. Immortal Ping was very clear that it had already been 50,000 years. If the Wine Sword Immortal did not resolve the demonic barrier in his heart, he would not be able to break through. A 9th Tribulation Transcender had a lifespan of 100,000 years at most. If Wine Sword Immortal does not break through, his lifespan will be depleted. "Sister Rong, I really have no other choice." Immortal Ping muttered to herself. For the past 50,000 years, in order to help the Wine Sword Immortal break the demonic barrier in his heart, she had thought of all sorts of ways but had never succeeded. Every time the 9 regions Genius tournaments young people came to Nine Heavens City, she would try to get Wine Sword Immortal to go out and take a look. With this in mind, Immortal Ping advised again, "Leave quickly. The Sword Dao's Green Lotus lineage is now relying on you to hold up the facade. You are already able to take charge of an area on your own." Wine Sword Immortal raised his gourd and drank again. "In the world of mortals with a sword, only wine can resolve my desires." At the same time, he hummed an off-key song and was about to go upstairs. No more wine." He suddenly stopped in his tracks and shook his wine gourd, frowning. "Why is there no wine now?" He pinched his fingers and divined, but found nothing. But the feeling of sudden inspiration was extremely obvious. This was a situation that had never happened in the past 50,000 years. "Oh well, let's go." Wine Sword Immortal regained his unrestrained self and laughed. "I can go with you to take a look, but after that, you have to get me 100,000-year-old moon frost wine." 100,000-year-old moon frost wine? You better go back to sleep." Immortal Ping stared with her eyes wide open, "Ha." Wine Sword Immortal laughed loudly. Then, with a thought, their spiritual awareness entered the sky-piercing mountain river painting. In the sky above the vast continent where the sky-piercing mountain was, the 2 figures were hidden in the starry sky. They were looking at the green lotus sky-piercing mountain. How are the young people this year? Wine Sword Immortal asked. There is a genius called Ji Wei, who is said to be hard to come by in 1,000,000 years. Just now, he challenged the Void Universe sky-piercing mountain and passed 2 rounds consecutively. Immortal Ping replied. That is an extraordinary person, who knows, he might become a great Tao immortal in the future. Wine Sword Immortal was surprised. He asked again, what about those who chose the Green Lotus altar? There are 9 people, I have already sent a message to the Mountain Guardian, the first 8 people have already failed. Now, the one who is challenging the mountain is called Jiang Xi. It is said that he has a slight chance of passing the first round. Oh. Let me take a look. Wine Sword Immortal raised his wine gourd and was about to drink when he remembered that there was no wine left. In the end, he could only helplessly shake his head and look at the Green Lotus sky-piercing mountain. Green Lotus sky-piercing mountain, Jiang Xi walked along the stone steps and quickly reached the first platform. This place was empty and did not seem to be dangerous. But then, the space changed and he fell into an illusion. In the illusory space, there was an endless mountain range. At this time, Jiang Xi was standing in the air. In front of him, there was a figure standing with a sword on his back. It was a middle-aged man wearing battle armor, exuding the powerful aura of Immortal Realm. Guardian. Immortal. It would be strange if he could pass. Jiang Xi's expression changed abruptly. As for the gatekeeper, he frowned, another original infant stage brat. Then, his aura suddenly decreased. His cultivation quickly fell to perfected nascent soul stage, the same as Jiang Xi. Challenger, my cultivation will remain the same as yours, but my Tao technique is different. My Tao technique will remain at the first level of sword intent. The Guardian said in a deep voice. Jiang Xi's expression eased a little, but when he heard the following words, his expression changed again. First level of sword intent. Saber Tao, Sword Tao, Spear Tao, and Axe Tao, these 4 special Tao techniques were somewhat different from the common 5 elements, time, and space Tao techniques. Under normal circumstances, after cultivating Tao techniques to the Tao of heaven and earth, the next level would be the Great Tao realm. And the next level after saber, sword, spear, and axe was Tao intent. Therefore, above sword Tao was sword intent. According to the spiritual power amplitude, the maximum amplitude of sword Tao level 10 was 2,000 times. Then sword intent level 10 was 20,000 times. To be more specific, the spiritual power amplitude of sword intent level 1 was 3,800 times. What's there to play? Jiang Xi's eyes widened. His Tao of Fire level 10 had a spiritual power amplitude of 1,000 times. But it was only 1,000 times. With such a big difference, there was no way to fight at all. The gatekeeper didn't even need to use a sword. A single fist was enough to kill him. Don't worry, according to the rules, the difficulty of each level is the same. My current Tao technique strength is equivalent to the first level of an ordinary Great Tao, the Guardian said again. Jiang Xi heaved a sigh of relief. But... Chapter 347. In terms of the Tao of heaven and earth, the cultivation of Tao techniques was divided into 3 levels, special, rare, and ordinary. When a Taoist technique entered the Great Tao level, it was only divided into special and ordinary. This was because there were thousands of Taoist techniques, but there were only 36 Great Taos. The cultivation before the Great Tao was naturally special and rare Taoist techniques, which had a higher chance of stepping onto the Great Tao than ordinary Taoist techniques. The limit of an ordinary Great Tao is 10,000 times, and the first realm is 1,900 times. I'm 1,000 times, and the difference is less than 2 times. How can I fight? Jiang Xi took a deep breath. It was too difficult. No wonder he had failed all his previous attempts. However, you should know that Sword Tao focuses on killing. Even if it only has the power of an ordinary first-level Great Tao technique, it's still much stronger than ordinary Great Tao techniques. In terms of attack power, it is also much stronger than other ordinary Great Taos. Are you ready? The gatekeeper's deep voice sounded again. Jiang Xi's eyes narrowed. Let's begin. Admit defeat. That was impossible. Buzz. The sound of a sword rang out. At the same time, the aura of a sword domain suddenly condensed on Jiang Xi's sword. Are all the sword Tao cultivators of the human race so weak now? The gatekeeper whispered. Swoosh. A soaring sword intent emanated from the long sword behind him and soared into the sky. Although he maintained his cultivation base at the perfected nascent soul realm, his current Taoist technique strength was at the tribulation immortal realm. The gatekeeper would not show mercy and instantly attacked. The sword was unstoppable, directly piercing through space and stabbing towards Jiang Xi. Boom! However, a layer of fire and wind condensed on Jiang Xi's sword. The Tao of Fire and the Gale Domain. This was not a fusion technique, but three Taoist techniques at the same time. He also cultivated other Taoist techniques. The gatekeeper's expression turned cold. Boom! Boom! The two swords instantly clashed. The three Taoist techniques collided with the pure sword intent. A powerful aura erupted and swept through the mountain range. Mountain peaks crumbled one after another. Bang! At the end of the first exchange, Jiang Xi was directly sent flying and smashed into a 10,000-meter tall mountain. Suddenly, half of the mountain exploded, and the mountain collapsed. Your Tao technique strength isn't bad. If you go to other heaven-span mountains, you can clear the first round. But here, you're still far from enough. The gatekeeper said in a deep voice. Don't look down on me. Jiang Xi rushed out from the rubble below and slashed at the gatekeeper. Clang! The two of them exchanged blows again. Riverward had always been at a disadvantage. His current spiritual energy amplitude was only 1,000 times. However, by using three Taoist techniques at the same time, he was able to hold on. Unfortunately, I'm unable to utilize the Tao fusion technique, otherwise, I'd surely kill him. Jiang Xi retreated repeatedly. They could only passively defend. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes. The gatekeeper was also somewhat surprised. His current strength was already equivalent to that of a first tribulation transcender. Jiang Xi had actually waited for so long. Moreover, he realized that Jiang Xi's use of Tao techniques was very exquisite. Sword Domain, Gale Domain, Li Fire Tao. Although it was not a fusion of Taos and Dharma, each had their own division of labor and coordination. Let's end this. The gatekeeper slashed again and forced Jiang Xi to retreat thousands of kilometers. This time, he took advantage of the fact that Jiang Xi was exhausted and used his sword intent to sweep the area. The gap is still too big. Jiang Xi felt helpless. He had failed to pass the round. In the starry sky, Wine Sword Immortal Zhongli and Immortal Ping saw everything. Immortal Ping sighed and said, "What a pity. His talent in fire-type Taoist techniques is much stronger than his talent in the Tao of the sword. It seems that there is no hope for the youngsters who chose the Green Lotus lineage this time." "No, Ping, you're mistaken." Wine Sword Immortal showed a rare serious expression. "Mistaken?" Immortal Ping was puzzled. "This youngster is very pure." "No, it should be said that his Tao of the sword is very pure. Although it's still at the sword domain level, it's not mixed with anything else." Wine Sword Immortal's gaze was deep, pure. Immortal Ping was even more puzzled. She was also a 7th tribulation transcender who practiced the Tao of the sword. However, she had never heard of someone who practiced the Tao of the sword being pure. However, she knew that although Wine Sword Immortal was still a tribulation transcender, his Taoist techniques had already reached the realm of sword intent. His understanding of the sword was higher than hers, so there was definitely a reason for his words. Wine Sword Immortal explained, humans have 7 emotions and 6 desires, and cultivators are no exception. When comprehending the Tao, one's Taoist techniques will be mixed with all kinds of emotions. Happiness, anger, sorrow, fear, hostility, evil, madness, ethereal, carefree, peaceful, and so on. As for this youngster Jiang Ci, his Taoist techniques don't have any emotions, and are extremely pure. If he can maintain such a pure Taoist technique, the bottleneck of his Taoist techniques in the future will be much smaller. Wine Sword Immortal sighed softly. His current bottleneck was brought about by his emotions. Although he knew it, he couldn't break it. In that case, Jiang Ci is very suitable for the Tao of the Sword. Immortal Ping's eyes lit up. Couldn't be more suitable. Wine Sword Immortal laughed, completely unrestrained. Then, he said with a solemn expression, Ping, I'm preparing to teach the Tao of the Sword in 9 Firmament City. Help me spread the word. That's great. Immortal Ping immediately smiled, very happy. Then, she suddenly thought of something and said with a frown, Big Brother Zhongli, are you so sure that this youngster Jiang Ci will be able to reach the Tao of the Sword? Can this youngster pass the 3rd trial of the Green Lotus Sky-Piercing Mountain in 30 years? Saber, sword, spear, and axe are the most difficult Taoist techniques to cultivate. Wine Sword Immortal chose to teach the Tao of the Sword at this time because he was targeting Jiang Ci. The youngsters of the 9 regions genius competition could only pass the 3rd trial of the Sky-Piercing Mountain. Only then would they be qualified to listen to the lectures of the Tribulation Transcender powerhouses in 9 Firmament City, and then the Tribulation Transcender powerhouses would accept them as disciples. Of course, there was an exception, and that was powerhouses above the true monarch level, who didn't need to follow this rule. Let's go back and talk about it. Wine Sword Immortal smiled gently, a trace of spirit hidden in his eyes. He still had a piece of information that he didn't reveal, and that was that Jiang Ci's Sword Tao was too similar to his Tao partner Rong, or Sword Tao. They were both very pure. It was just that Jiang Ci's Sword Tao was a bit purer. But no matter what, as long as it was similar. There was hope in his heart. The 2 figures disappeared into the starry sky of the Sky-Piercing Mountain River painting. Below, on the vast land where the Sky-Piercing Mountain was located. The black-robed old man guarding the mountain looked up at the starry sky where the 2 were and sighed softly. The other geniuses were already discussing at this time. Jiang Ci has already been in the trial for 5 minutes. Is he going to pass the first trial? It's hard to say. Among the top 10, only Ji Wei and Mu Ning passed the first trial. Even the 2nd place Yan Jiufeng and the 3rd place Kuang Lang failed. Look, he came out. The mountain guard didn't say that he passed the first trial. He failed. Many geniuses let out a sigh of relief. If Jiang Ci passed it again, the blow would be too great. Kuang Lang clenched and unclenched his fists. Others didn't care, but he did. Because Jiang Ci had lasted for 5 minutes on the Sky-Piercing Mountain, far exceeding his 3 minutes. Comparing the 2, it meant that Jiang Ci's Tao strength had far surpassed his. 1, 2, 3, they're all monsters. Yan Jiufeng muttered. Then, he said to Mu Ning, I'm leaving first. Mu Ning tilted his head and knocked on his straw hat with his bamboo flute. Only a year had passed, and Jiang Ci's improvement was beyond his expectations. In the end, all 3,600 geniuses had finished challenging the mountain. Only Ji Wei passed the 2nd trial, and Mu Ning passed the 1st trial. The others all failed. The ones who lasted the longest were Yan Jiufeng and Jiang Ci. The competition began from this moment onwards. The other top 10 geniuses became even more hardworking. This was also a scene that the human race experts were happy to see. Only through competition could there be improvement. However, a piece of news spread among the geniuses the next day, causing a sensation. Chapter 348. 9 Heaven City, Inside Jiang Xi's stone house, Mu Ning was taken in as a disciple by a perfected cultivator. Jiang Xi held his communication bead in shock. This guy couldn't keep a secret. He had just sent a message to show off to him. He had been taken in as a disciple by a perfected cultivator in Nine Heavens City and was about to pay him a visit. Fuck. A perfected cultivator. Jiang Xi still couldn't express his shock. A perfected cultivator was a Dao immortal expert who had completed a great Dao. When a Dao immortal was invisible, a perfected cultivator could do whatever he wanted. If Mu Ning was taken in as a disciple by such an expert, he would have a chance to step onto the great Dao in the future. Jiang Xi was shocked and fell into deep thought. Ji Wei didn't have a perfected cultivator to take in a disciple, but Mu Ning got a master first. Why is that? And a perfected cultivator has an endless lifespan. If it's not necessary, they rarely take in disciples. Looks like everyone has secrets. Ji Wei has secrets, so does Mu Ning. Even Yan Jiufeng, Kuang Lang, Blood Child, and the others have secrets. Thinking of this, he smiled. Others had secrets, so did he. Envy aside, I have the experience panel. I'll catch up sooner or later. Jiang Xi wasn't the only one who was shocked and confused. All the geniuses were the same. Even Ji Wei was agitated by this. He went straight to the inheritance altar and used one of the 2 chances he had just received. No one wanted to fall behind others. This was especially true for the prideful geniuses. At the same time, in the primal universe, Purple Heaven Sect's 6th heaven, a majestic palace sat on the peak of a towering mountain surrounded by stars. Iron Mountain perfected cultivator in blood-red armor sat on top of the palace. As for Immortal Ilyang and Immortal Chuha, they were standing respectfully below. Greetings, perfected cultivator. How did the youngsters of this batch do? Iron Mountain perfected cultivator's hoarse voice sounded. Immortal Ilyang said respectfully, only Ji Wei and Mu Ning passed the 2nd stage of the Void Universe Sky Mountain and the 1st stage of the All Things Sky Mountain. Not bad. What about the others? Jiang Xi and Yan Jiufeng were able to pass the 1st stage within 3 years. True Lord Iron Mountain pondered for a moment before nodding. You may leave first. Immortal Ilyang and Immortal Chuha hurriedly took their leave. In the empty hall, perfected Lord Iron Mountain pondered for a long time as he looked ahead with a deep gaze. From his position, he could see the flow of the galaxy. Kuan Yu spends most of his time in seclusion in the heavenly court of the Dao Alliance. Why would he notice a young fellow who hasn't even reached the Dao merge? True Lord Iron Mountain frowned. After becoming a Dao immortal, one could live as long as the heavens if one did not encounter any calamities or tribulations. As for true Lord Kuan Yu, he was a Dao immortal expert who had lived for countless years. She knew more secrets than he did. So what if I'm recruiting disciples? This year's geniuses are all under my Iron Mountain. 9 Heavens City, Wine Sword Immortal's residence. Wine Sword Immortal and Immortal Ping were watching a battle. It displayed the scene of Mu Ning challenging the 1st stage of the Myriad Heavenspan Mountain. Big Brother Zhongli, can you see anything? Why would true Lord Kuan Yu accept him as a disciple? Immortal Ping turned her head and asked. Wine Sword Immortal sleepily said, I can't see anything either. However, this young fellow's eyes are as pure as Jiang Xi's sword. The eyes are the windows to the soul. It's rare to see someone who can still maintain a pure heart after cultivating for hundreds of years. The 2 were somewhat puzzled. Dao immortals like true Lord Kuan Yu, who had endless lifespans, would not easily accept disciples. This was because if they did not cause trouble, they would not die and would not need to pass on their mantle. Instead, tribulation transcenders like them who were nearing the end of their lifespans would often accept disciples. It seems that this year's 9 Regions Genius Tournament is the strongest in the past 1,000,000 years. Not only is there Ji Wei, but there's also Mu Ning, Immortal Ping said. What? Are you looking down on that young fellow who cultivates the Tao of the sword? Wine Sword Immortal drank another mouthful of wine. Immortal Ping smiled and said, how can I look down on someone that Big Brother Zhongli thinks highly of? I just feel that he's still a little lacking compared to Ji Wei and Mu Ning. A little lacking? That's because there's no one guiding him. Geniuses like Ji Wei and Mu Ning not only have high attainments in the Tao, but they are also very skilled in using it. It's obvious that there's someone guiding them behind the scenes. In comparison, although Jiang Xi's attainment in the Tao is also high, his actual use is a bit shallow. The gap between theory and practice is not small. Wine Sword Immortal shook his head lightly. What does Big Brother Zhongli mean? I have to give him some pointers. It's not easy for the Green Lotus lineage to have such a good seedling. Those Sword Tao perfected lords might not like him, but I do. Immortal Ping smiled and shook her head. He had not even accepted a disciple, but he already regarded her as his master. But then again, I originally wanted to teach him a technique and create a sensation this time, but someone else beat me to it. Although Wine Sword Immortal said this, his expression was very indifferent, as if he did not care at all. Immortal Ping smiled and said, don't worry, you are the dignified Wine Sword Immortal. In terms of fame, you are not inferior to true Lord Kuan-Yu. The news that Mu Ning had been accepted as a disciple by a perfected lord quickly spread. A group of young geniuses stirred up a frenzy of cultivation competition. Jiang Xi was naturally also focused on cultivation. Although he was not at the inheritance altar, he still had to continue his deduction. He activated his sword domain and gale domain at the same time. However, he clearly felt that the efficiency of his sword Tao deduction had decreased by 100 times. It would be great if I could sit on the Green Lotus altar and cultivate every day. Jiang Xi looked forward to it. If others cultivated at the altar for a long time, they might suffer from indigestion. He did not need to worry about that. He only needed the Tao technique inheritance at the inheritance altar as a reference to continue his deduction. Unfortunately, dreams were too far away from reality. The difficulty of challenging the sky-piercing mountain was too high. Oh. At that moment, Jiang Xi discovered that someone had sent him a message. Is it Daodu? He smiled. He had spent 10 days here, but more than a month had passed in the original universe. It's not him. Who is Wine Sword Immortal? Jiang Xi scanned it with his spiritual perception and discovered that it was an unfamiliar transmission mark. Furthermore, it was a message. Ever since the 9 Regions Genius Tournament ended, all kinds of invitations had flooded in. For peace and quiet, he had changed his transmission mark. Now, only a few friends and family, as well as Purple Heaven Sex Immortal Yu Yang, knew his transmission mark. As for this Wine Sword Immortal, he had never heard of him. However, this name did not sound simple. He was definitely a tribulation transcender. Jiang Xi checked the message with doubts. I'm Wine Sword Immortal. When you challenged the sky-piercing mountain yesterday, I watched from above. Your sword Tao is not bad, and you should continue to maintain it. However, you're not very good at the practical application of Tao techniques. I suggest you systematically learn the basic knowledge of sword Tao application. Our Purple Heaven Sex Treasure Pavilion has the tune of 10,000 swords. It's a cultivation technique that explains the basic application of the Green Lotus Sword Tao. You can buy it and learn it. Also, go look for the stone house in the North 9th District of Nine Heavens City. The Tao runes there will be helpful to you. Chapter 349. It was a simple message, but it pointed out the problem and gave a solution. It was like an elder giving advice to a junior. After reading it, Jiang Xi was shocked and fell into deep thought, recalling his battles in recent years. Even though I have experienced a lot of battles in the 9 Regions Genius Battle, in terms of practical application of Tao techniques, I am still inferior. Compared to other geniuses who have cultivated for hundreds or thousands of years, I am indeed much worse. This was a problem that was difficult to avoid. He could use the experience points to increase his Dao technique realm. However, combat experience was accumulated through countless battles. The problem was that he had only cultivated for less than 50 years. To be specific, it was less than 30 years. Judging from his tone, Wine's Sword Immortal is an immortal of the Purple Heaven sect. Since he is named Sword Immortal, his sword Dao strength must not be bad. I have to pay attention to the problem pointed out by such an expert. With a thought, Jiang Xie entered the Purple Heaven sect board in the Eye of Heaven network through his communication bead. He was now a level 3 disciple of the Purple Heaven sect, so he naturally had the authority to access this place. A three-dimensional phantom appeared in the stone house. Search for Wine's Sword Immortal. Suddenly, the phantom changed, and a large number of images, pictures, and text information appeared. Jiang Xie quickly read with his spiritual sense. After a moment, only surprise was left on his face. There is actually such a person. According to the information he could find, this was a 9 tribulation sword immortal who had once shocked the 9 regions. 50,000 years ago, he joined forces with another tribulation transcender to kill and seriously injure a Dao immortal of the demon race. Tribulation transcenders and Dao immortals were on 2 completely different levels. One had an end to their lifespan, the other had an endless lifespan. It was almost impossible to fight above one's level. Battle achievements were one thing. On the other hand, Wine's Sword Immortal was a heroic and righteous person, famous for being unrestrained. Back then, he was the most popular immortal in the entire 9 regions of the Dao Alliance. However, for some unknown reason, after that battle 50,000 years ago, the Wine's Sword Immortal disappeared without a trace. He paid attention to the battle when I challenged the sky-piercing mountain. Is he living in seclusion in 9 Heavens City? Jiang Xi's heart moved. It is an honor for such an expert to personally guide me. Jiang Xi smiled and said again, enter the Purple Heaven sect's treasure pavilion. The 3D illusion changed, and a virtual shopping mall appeared. Search for the melody of 10,000 swords. Information about a cultivation method appeared in front of Jiang Xi. Tune of 10,000 swords, 88 points, basic application of the Green Lotus Sword Doctrine, restricted to disciples of the first sky and above. Were the basic manuals so expensive? Jiang Xi was dumbfounded. He had thought that it would only cost 100 or 200 top-grade spiritual crystals. 88 points. Wouldn't that be 8,800 top-grade spiritual crystals and 8 billion low-grade spiritual crystals? Then he checked his account balance, 998 top-grade spiritual crystals. Lack of money, Jiang Xi shook his head helplessly. He had used up almost all of the 10,000 top-grade spirit crystals he had received from the 9 Zones Genius Battle to create his doppelganger. Wine's Sword Immortal also mentioned Dao rune carvings. I wonder what they are. His luck was not bad. With his current authority, he had successfully found the Dao rune inscriptions in the Eye of Heaven network. After reading it, Jiang Xi was pleasantly surprised. Good stuff. Many experts who cultivated in 9 Heavens City like to comprehend the Dao of heaven and earth on the rooftops. Some experts would casually carve their understanding of Dao onto the roof when they were cultivating Dao techniques so that those who came after them could refer to them. And some later generations would add their own insights to the rooftops, which led to more and more Dao rune carvings on the rooftops. In Jiang Xi's view, wasn't this equivalent to a weaker version of the inheritance altar? Because the experts who cultivated in 9 Heavens City were not only those who had yet to become immortals, but also many immortal path experts. The Dao rune carvings they left behind were definitely not simple. The only drawback was that these Dao rune carvings were rather messy, unlike the Dao technique inheritance on the inheritance altar, which was very complete and systematic. It doesn't matter to me whether it's messy or not, as long as it can be used as a reference for deduction. Jiang Xi's eyes lit up. Thinking of this, he got up and went out, ready to go to the stone house that Wine's Sword Immortal had mentioned to look for the Dao rune carvings there. After coming out, Jiang Xi found that Yan Jiufeng, Mo Hong, Blood Child, Kuang Lang and the other geniuses were already searching the empty rooftops of the stone houses. Are they all looking for the Dao rune carvings? Jiang Xi sighed. These extraordinary geniuses were more well-informed than him, who came from an ordinary background. Fortunately, Wine's sword immortal had reminded him, otherwise he would have fallen behind the others. Even if he found out from the other geniuses later, he would be much later than the others. Time was precious. Then, Jiang Xi went straight to the stone house at North 9th Stone House in Section C. His figure was also noticed by Yan Jiufeng and the others. Jiang Xi, he also knows about the existence of the Dao rune carvings. Many people's eyes flashed. Back then, my strength was almost the same as his, but now he has surpassed me. I have to put in more effort than him to prove that my third place is deserved. Kuang Lang's pride and competitiveness were his motivation to move forward, and the speed at which he searched for the Dao rune carvings was also much faster. Talent is the foundation. Whether or not you can become an expert depends on your temperament and willpower. Being strong for a while doesn't mean you will be strong forever. I will definitely catch up. Mo Hong, who looked like a scholar, had a determined look in his eyes. The others, like Blood Child, Feng Lu, Li Xianxian and Lin Ling, had similar thoughts. However, no one said anything. No one was willing to waste precious time and speed up the search for the Dao rune carvings. These geniuses all understood that even if they entered the Purple Heaven sect, they would face great competition. Because resources were limited, in a fair competition, the better they performed, the more resources they would receive. Improve. Improve. On the other side, Jiang Xi had a clear goal and didn't search aimlessly. He quickly came to the stone house at North 9th Stone House in Section C. On the roof, he saw the so-called Dao rune carvings and was immediately attracted to them. Those messy carvings seemed to have existed for countless years and still faintly emitted a shocking sword intent. It feels very similar to the sword Dao inheritance at the Green Lotus altar. Jiang Xi's eyes lit up as he carefully observed the Dao rune carvings. The Dao illusion at the Green Lotus altar used the growth and changes of the Green Lotus to demonstrate 9 processes. 1, 4, 100, 1000, 10,000, 1000, 100, 100, 4, 1. Some of these Dao runes seem to be describing the inheritance of 1 green lotus, while others seem to be describing 4 or 100 lotuses. At the end, Jiang Xi even saw a line of words carved in the common language of the Dao Alliance, which also emitted sharp sword intent. I've already comprehended the first 3 of the 9 growth changes of the Green Lotus. I also have a general idea of the next 1,000 and 10,000. From today onwards, I can compose the tune of 10,000 swords. Within 1,000 years, I will complete the tune of 10,000 swords. I will be able to pass 9 tribulations and the first cycle of life and death. I will become a great Dao immortal and be free in the world. Fast. Fast. By Lu Yan of the Sword Sect. Chapter 350. Jiang Xi was stunned by the bold handwriting. 9 tribulations in a row to become a great Dao immortal. Judging from the remnant sword intent, these runes have existed for a long time. This person should have succeeded, right? No. If he succeeded, then the price of the tune of 10,000 swords in the Purple Heaven sect's treasure vault would be more than 88 points. A great Dao immortal was a perfected cultivator. If one wanted to buy a perfected cultivator's cultivation technique manual, the price would be about 10,000 times higher. I wonder where this person came from. With that thought, Jiang Xi entered the Omniscient Eye network with his communication bead again. He searched for Lu Yan's information and added the keywords Sword Gate and Green Lotus. Otherwise, countless pieces of information would have been found. After all, there were trillions of humans in the universe, and there were countless people named Lu Yan. After adding the keywords, the search was successful almost instantly. Riverward used his spiritual sense to quickly read the contents. As a result, he sank into silence and then sighed with emotion. Another heaven-defying person who fell before becoming an immortal. In terms of talent, this person is many times stronger than Ji Wei. His talent is truly overwhelming and peerless in his generation. According to the public information, Lu Yan was a sword Dao genius from 8 million years ago and came from the Sword Gate, one of the 3 gates. After being allowed to enter the ancient Dao source world to cultivate, he passed 4 trials on his first attempt at the Green Lotus Skirich Mountain. This achievement shocked the 9 realms of the Dao Alliance and caused a sensation among the races of the universe. In the next 30 years, Lu Yan passed the trials again and finally passed the 10th trial when he left the ancient Dao source world. At that time, many of the upper echelons of the human race thought highly of Lu Yan and thought that he was the most promising genius cultivator to become a Dao Lord. However, this genius was like a comet. After returning to the Sword Gate, he died in a trial. One must be careful on the path of cultivation. Jiang Xi took a deep breath. Regardless of the time spent cultivating, Lu Yan was even crazier than him, a genius with an experience panel. However, such a heaven-defying person died before becoming an immortal. Moreover, the human race had existed for tens of thousands of years. There must be many geniuses like Lu Yan. Jiang Xi committed caution to memory and then looked at the Sword Dao runes on the roof again. Now, let's see if Lu Yan's Sword Dao inscriptions have any effect on my Sword Dao deduction. The Wine Sword Immortal reminded him to come here to observe because these Sword Dao runes were Lu Yan's drafts before he created the melody of 10,000 swords. If these Sword Dao runes were helpful to his deduction, then the effect of the melody of 10,000 swords would be even more obvious. After that, Jiang Xi carefully observed the messy carvings in front of him and muttered in his heart. Use the purple firmament sword scripture and sword domain to deduce once. A moment later, the deduction was completed. Then, he carefully sensed the changes in the sword domain. Ha, it's working. Jiang Xi was pleasantly surprised. Even though the changes were extremely subtle, so much so that even with his spiritual sense, he wouldn't have been able to discover them if he hadn't carefully examined them. But if there was a change, it meant that there was an effect. Next, Jiang Xi tried to deduce dozens of times. Finally, he came to a conclusion. The efficiency of Sword Dao deduction had increased by 2 times. Although it was much slower than the speed of the inheritance altar, it was still faster than usual. Now, I'll deduce the Sword Dao with all my strength. Jiang Xi thought to himself. As for the Gale Dao, he would have to wait. Because now, there was a crucial problem: where could he get experience points? No matter how powerful the engine was, it couldn't run without oil. According to his previous plan, he would absorb and refine the Tao of heaven and earth in the ancient Tao source world. Then, he would madly deduce the Tao of heaven and earth. Now, it seemed that his original plan was too simple. Although the Tao of heaven and earth is visible to the naked eye, I can't just fly up and absorb and refine it, right? Jiang Xi shook his head. That was too impractical. Didn't you see that many powerful cultivators were looking up from the rooftops? He reckoned that as soon as he flew up, he would be slapped until not even a speck of dust remained. Let my clone hunt monsters on Earth and gain experience points. That's a good idea. Jiang Xi was deep in thought. But unless it was absolutely necessary, he didn't want to expose the existence of his clone. Only a hidden trump card could be a trump card. He looked at his remaining experience points. Experience points, 490/500,000. When the 9 Regions Genius Tournament ended, I had more than 1.2 billion experience points. After a year of deduction, I have less than 500 million experience points left. Jiang Xi couldn't guarantee that he could deduce the Sword Dao or the Gale Dao with these experience points. As for deducing both, he didn't even think about it. His face wasn't that pale. I have to think of a way to get more experience points. Experience points were like the savings in the Dao Alliance Crystal Bank. Naturally, the more, the better. Jiang Xi thought about this problem as he silently deduced in his heart. His remaining experience points kept decreasing. During this process, he couldn't feel the passage of time at all. In the blink of an eye, half a month had passed. In one of the palaces around Nine Cloud Palace, the Wine Sword Immortal was preparing for the imparting of techniques. As a Nine Tribulations Sword Immortal who had once shocked the 9 regions, his first imparting of techniques naturally couldn't be so casual. He also had to go through some procedures and announce it widely. After all, the cultivators of the Green Lotus Sword Tao included disciples of the 3 gates and 6 sects, as well as other talented human cultivators. There were many forces behind them. Today, Immortal Ping came again to tell him some things to pay attention to. After Immortal Ping left, the Wine Sword Immortal's spiritual sense swept across Nine Cloud City and frowned slightly. It's been half a month and that little guy still hasn't bought the tune of 10,000 swords. Just looking at Lu Yan's sword Tao carvings on the roof, the cultivation effect isn't obvious. He got into the top 10 of the 9 regions Genius Tournament and has a reward of 10,000 Supreme Grade Spirit Crystals. It should be more than enough to buy the tune of 10,000 swords, right? Then, the Wine Sword Immortal used his authority in the Purple Cloud Sex Treasure Pavilion to do a simple check. This little guy, the 9 regions Genius Tournament just ended and he already bought the Spirit Awakening Pearl and Soul Accumulation Fruit. He hasn't reached the nascent soul stage yet and he dares to split his spiritual sense and refine an avatar. How bold! This way, his sword Tao will be delayed for a few more years. Fine, it's good to let him suffer a loss. The Wine Sword Immortal shook his head. Then he frowned and smiled bitterly. This nuisance of opening a mountain to teach is really not a simple task. I regret it, I regret it. He drank a mouthful of wine and staggered back to the attic to sleep. As for Jiang Xi, he was very patient. He couldn't be too hasty to prevent spoiling things through excessive enthusiasm. Jiang Xi calmed down and quietly deduced the sword Tao carvings on the stone house for half a month. On this day, the peace was broken. Mu Ning excitedly came to find him. Jiang Xi, so you're here. I've been looking for you for a long time. The shepherd boy's face was full of excitement. Didn't you go to find a master? Why are you looking for me? Jiang Xi didn't have any temper towards Mu Ning. This pure-hearted shepherd boy naturally gave people a good impression. Chapter 351. After the apprenticeship, I have something good to share with you. Mu Ning looked very excited. What is it? Jiang Xi smiled. When I went to the apprenticeship, Master told me that there are 2 other good things in 9 Heaven City apart from the inheritance altar. Tell me about them. Jiang Xi's interest was piqued now. If a Tao Immortal Perfected Emperor said it was good, then it must be good. The first is the Tao pattern carvings. Many cultivators in 9 Heaven City like to carve on the roofs. Mu Ning pretended to be mysterious. Don't talk about the Tao pattern carvings. I'm studying them now. Jiang Xi interrupted him with a smile. No wonder you're not at home, Mu Ning muttered. Only then did he notice the sword Tao carvings in front of Jiang Xi. Then he said, you definitely haven't heard of the second one. It's the spirits of Tao outside 9 Heaven City. Spirits of Tao. Jiang Xi's expression changed. He really hadn't heard of them. Mu Ning nodded with a smile. My master said that the biggest difference between the ancient Tao origin world and the original universe is that the Tao origin world. The ancient Tao origin world is like the beginning of heaven and earth. The various Taos are extremely unstable and can't be seen with the naked eye. We can easily comprehend the Taos here when we cultivate. I know all that. Jiang Xi smiled. Don't worry. You definitely don't know the rest. These unstable Taos combine with the dense heaven and earth spirit chi to form a special life form called the spirits of Tao. A life form formed by Taos. Jiang Xi's expression changed. After these spirits of Tao die, they'll turn into a small amount of Taos with no attributes. Cultivators can directly refine and absorb them to improve their understanding of Taos. However, Master warned me that many of the newcomers in the 9 Regions Genius Tournament die in the ancient Tao origin world because they hunt spirits of Tao. If you're not strong enough, I don't recommend you go out of the city to hunt them. So I'm planning to go out of the city after a while to check out the situation. Mu Ning's eyes were still shining as he spoke. Jiang Xi had a plan in his heart. Spirits of Tao was a life form formed by Taos. Hunting them would definitely give experience points. Now that he was lacking experience, he could give it a try. However, even Mu Ning's master had reminded him that if he wasn't strong enough, he shouldn't leave the city. Before hunting, one must first assess the level of danger. Moreover, Jiang Xi had another guess. The spirit of Tao aura was a special life form formed by the Tao art. After it died, it would become a Tao art with no attributes. Then, after absorbing and refining it, would it also turn into experience points? With that in mind, he chatted with Mu Ning for a while longer. Mu Ning also knew that time was precious. In the end, he left in high spirits, saying that he was going to look for Tao runes. After pondering for a moment, Jiang Xi went to remove the spiritual awareness imprint from the stone house he had lived in before. Then, he changed his residence to this stone house with the marks of Lu Yan's sword path. After doing all this, he rushed out of the city with anticipation. Moving quickly in this gray world, they soon arrived at the gate of 9 Heavens City. He saw a few other familiar figures. They were the other geniuses from the 9 Regions Genius Tournament. When they saw Jiang Xi, they all greeted him. Jiang Xi, you've also heard of the spirit of Tao aura? Yeah, I'm going to take a look. Jiang Xi chuckled. This stone tablet has an introduction to the outside of the city. You can take a look first before you go out, someone reminded him. Oh. Thank you for the reminder. Jiang Xi hurriedly thanked him and then moved lightly to a stone tablet under the city gate. And those people didn't say much. After reading it, they directly went out of the city and went hunting together. Jiang Xi looked at the stone tablet for a moment and had a general understanding of the situation outside the city. 9 Heavens City was divided into 3 areas. The first area was 2,000 kilometers around 9 Heavens City. The spirits of Tao aura here were all at the nascent soul stage. The second area was 2,000 to 20,000 kilometers around 9 Heavens City. The spirits of Tao aura were all at the nascent soul stage. The third area was the vast outermost area. The spirits of Tao aura living here were at the Tao integration stage. Note, the death rate of hunting spirits of Tao aura is extremely high. Don't take too much risk. Do what you can, the division of the areas is so detailed. It should be a cultivation ground specially prepared for the geniuses of the human race. There aren't any spirits of Tao aura above the Tao integration stage. That's right. 9 Heavens City is right next to it. Even if there are spirits of Tao aura in the tribulation immortal stage, they will be killed by the human race. Jiang Xi chuckled. From this, it could be seen that the entire ancient Tao origin world was a cultivation ground for the human race. Although the first area is full of nascent soul stage spirits of Tao aura, I can't relax. Not only did Mu Ning's master remind me, but the stone tablet also emphasized that the death rate outside the city is very high. This means that even if the area outside the city is divided by the human race, it's still very dangerous. After all, those who could cultivate in the ancient Tao origin world wouldn't be weak. After seeing Lu Yan's experience, Jiang Xi's vigilance rose to the highest level. At this time, many geniuses came from the city. He also reminded them to take a look at the stone tablet. Then he didn't stay any longer and stepped into the area outside 9 Heavens City in a flash. The terrain outside the city wasn't complicated. There were also mountains and rivers. However, these mountains were very low and hilly. Moreover, the gray fog outside the city was thicker, and visibility was very low. It gave people the feeling that there was some great danger hidden inside. What shocked Jiang Xi even more was that the gray fog had the effect of suppressing spiritual sense. The range of his spiritual sense was greatly reduced. To be safe, he didn't go too far from Nine Heaven City. There's movement. After walking for a while, Jiang Xi heard a rustling sound in the fog not far away. Wu, a creature with 2.5 heads, broke through the thick fog and arrived in front of Riverward. It let out a strange low growl. Late stage nascent soul stage. Jiang Xi judged the strength of this spirit of Tao aura through the strength of its aura. Kill. Jiang Xi stabbed with his sword and his figure flashed. Roar. It was surprisingly easy to kill. Jiang Xi relied on his Taoist technique strength that was far beyond the nascent soul stage. With just one sword, he instantly killed this spirit of Tao aura in the late nascent soul stage. You killed a spirit of Tao aura in the late nascent soul stage. Experience points plus 3,800, the experience panel's prompt sounded in his mind, but Jiang Xi didn't pay attention to it. Because the spirit of Tao aura that he killed turned into a colorful ball of light the size of a fingernail in less than a breath's time. Is this an attributeless Taoist technique? Jiang Xi waved his hand and his body absorbed the colorful ball of light. Almost in the blink of an eye, these balls of light were completely refined by him. You comprehended an attributeless Taoist technique. Experience points plus 1 million, the experience panel's prompt sounded again. Jiang Xi's eyes widened in surprise, but before he had time to feel anything, there was a big movement in the gray world in the distance. Chapter 352. Ah! Go! Go! There are too many. Roar! Panicked shouts and strange roars came from the world of gray fog. Rumble! The shouts quickly disappeared, but the ground shook more and more violently, as if thousands of beasts were running. Jiang Xi's face changed. He recognized that the shouts were from the geniuses who had reminded him to look at the stone tablet at the city gate. It had been less than 10 minutes and they were all dead. Those people were not weak. They were all the top 360 geniuses of the 9 Zones Geniuses competition. Otherwise, they would not have the guts to greet him. Run! Jiang Xi did not hesitate. He turned and ran. In the next moment, the gray fog started to churn violently. Strange nascent soul stage Taoist rhyme spirits started to rush towards them from all directions. There were hundreds of thousands of them. Whoosh! Not only did Jiang Xi use the Gale realm, but he also used the Tao of fire. The wind helped the fire, and his speed was at its highest. He left behind a series of afterimages. In an instant, he was back at the city gate. The spirits of Taoist rhyme that were chasing after them seemed to be afraid of Nine Heaven City. They stopped 10 kilometers away. They only growled fiercely, emitting a bloodthirsty light. Jiang Xi turned around and looked at the hundreds of thousands of spirits of Tao. He was horrified. Almost caught up to him. If he had been caught by hundreds of thousands of nascent soul stage cultivators, he would have been turned into dust. Jiang Xi finally understood why immortal Yi Liang had said, "Survive." At that time, no one had discovered any fatal danger in Nine Heaven City. They had thought that they would be fine as long as they did not disturb the powerhouses. It turned out that the danger did not come from the powerhouses who were immersed in cultivation. It came from the spirits of Tao outside the city. Below the city gate, the other geniuses who were about to leave the city to hunt spirits of Tao saw this scene. Their faces turned pale, and they were terrified. Jiang Xi, are these all spirits of Tao? Someone could not help but ask. Yes. Jiang Xi nodded, looking serious. Go back, and cultivate. Before they even stepped out of the city gate, they gave up on the hunting trip that they had been looking forward to. Although the risks and benefits were equal. But before they saw the benefits, they saw the risks. Jiang Xi didn't leave immediately because he saw the prophets. He was carefully observing the hundreds of thousands of ferocious spirits. A moment later, all the spirits of the Taoist rhymes returned to the gray world and hid in the gray mist. The risk is high, but the reward is also high. Jiang Xi calculated in his heart. Killing a nascent soul stage spirit of Taoist rhyme didn't count the experience points gained. Refining those non-elemental Taoist arts actually gave him 1 million experience points. Right now, he was lacking experience points. I'm sure that spirits of the precepts don't dare to come within 10 kilometers of Nine Heaven City. The one I just killed seems to be a lone spirit of the precepts. I just don't know if this situation of being alone is a coincidence, or does it happen often. Under the premise of ensuring a safe distance, go and investigate again. Jiang Xi made his decision. If there really wasn't a chance, then he would give up. His life was the most important. His figure flashed and he came to a place 20 kilometers away from Nine Heaven City. This distance could ensure that he returned to the safe area in the shortest time possible. Then he hid and waited quietly, remaining patient. About 2 hours later, there was a slight movement in the gray mist world in front of him. Although the detection range of his spiritual sense had shrunk, he soon detected a black spirit of the precepts with 8 legs. Roar! That spirit of the precepts had also discovered Jiang Xi and directly pounced on him fiercely. The speed of a nascent soul stage cultivator arrived in an instant. But in Jiang Xi's eyes, it was not enough at all. Sword light flashed. With 2 slashes, he easily killed it again. You killed a mid-stage nascent soul stage spirit of Taoist rhyme, experience points plus 3,400, then, Jiang Xi directly absorbed the non-elemental Taoist art formed by the spirit of Taoist rhyme. You comprehended a non-elemental Taoist art, experience points plus 1 million. He turned around and left. Roar! Roar! Rumble, accompanied by strange roars one after another, the ground shook violently. A large number of spirit of Taoist rhyme beasts attacked again. But this time, Jiang Xi was prepared in advance. With extreme speed, he steadily returned to the safe area within 10 kilometers of Nine Heaven City. Those hundreds of thousands of spirits of Taoist rhyme stopped 10 kilometers away, constantly roaring. There's hope. Jiang Xi was overjoyed. This proved that the spirits of Taoist rhyme were really afraid of Nine Heaven City and did not dare to approach. And he found that the spirits of Taoist rhyme had very low intelligence. They only had a simple impulse to kill. Hunting them was much easier than normal nascent soul stage cultivators. The real danger mainly came from the huge number of spirits of Taoist rhyme. So, when all the spirits of Taoist rhyme had dispersed, Jiang Xi once again waited 20 kilometers away. Wait for the fish that escaped the net. Then he would hunt and escape. As time passed, more and more geniuses heard about the existence of the spirits of Taoist rhyme. Although many people had seen the terrifying number of spirits of Taoist rhyme, there would never be a lack of people in the world who dared to take risks. Especially when some geniuses refined non-elemental Taoist techniques and found that their Taoist technique comprehension had improved, their drive to hunt was even stronger. The high risk had brought about huge profits. Soon, the geniuses set off a wave of craze to hunt the spirits of Taoist rhyme. There were even people who dared to go deep into the fog world. So, in just half a month, nearly 10% of the 3,600 people died. More than 300 people died outside Nine Heaven City. The stage of hunting the spirits of Taoist rhyme eliminated many people with poor temperament, will, battle experience, and carelessness. Fate was death. And Jiang Xi only reminded Mu Ning during this process. Then he steadily maintained his own rhythm and picked up the fish that escaped the net every day. Of course, he knew what was important. The purpose of gaining experience was to improve his strength, so the plan he set for himself was to come out and hunt for 10 days a month. The rest of the time, he would be on the roof of the stone house, deducing his sword Dao according to the runes left by Lu Yen. A month later, another piece of news that shook the entire Nine Heavens city quickly spread. The Wine Sword Immortal, who had been silent for 50,000 years, was going to teach. Many Essence Soul, Tao Integration, and even Tribulation Immortal powerhouses who were cultivating in Nine Heavens City suddenly became excited. Those who were qualified to listen to the class all went to the Wine Sword Immortal's residence. Who was the Wine Sword Immortal? Among the geniuses, except for a few people with extraordinary backgrounds, the others had never heard of the Wine Sword Immortal. But soon, everyone found the information of the Wine Sword Immortal on the Eye of Heaven network. After learning about the Wine Sword Immortal's past, those geniuses who used swords as weapons all showed a look of fascination. Sword Immortals were like this. They wished they could become the Wine Sword Immortal's disciple right now. Unfortunately, they were not qualified to listen to the Wine Sword Immortal's class. In this year's 9 Regions Genius Tournament, only Ji Wei had passed the second stage of the Sky-Piercing Mountain. And if they wanted to listen to a Tribulation Immortal powerhouse, they had to at least pass the third stage of the Sky-Piercing Mountain. Chapter 353. Jiang Xi already knew about the Wine Sword Immortal and had received his advice. Therefore, he was only surprised by this. Such a powerhouse had actually not opened his sect to accept disciples all this time. However, he quickly put this matter to the back of his mind. He only had 30 years in the ancient Tao Source world, so he had to seize the time to cultivate. Time flew by, and a year passed in the blink of an eye. On this day, Jiang Xi sat cross-legged on the roof of the stone house as usual, immersed in cultivation. He stared at the sword Tao inscriptions, and occasionally looked up at the Tao techniques visible to the naked eye. He kept repeating the deduction in his heart, "You have comprehended the sword Tao, experience points plus 20 million, when the pleasant notification sounded in his mind. Jiang Xi's body shook, and his eyes were filled with surprise. Success! It was too sudden. He quickly opened the experience points panel to check. Cultivation, True Body, Nascent Soul, Later Stage, 1.06 million, 1.06 million, Clone, Golden Core, Later Stage, 397500397500, Tao Technique, Sword Tao, less than 110 million, Fire Tao, 10th level, 50 million, Gale Domain, 10th level, 5 million, Amplitude, 1000 times, Tao of Fire, Secret Technique, Cultivation Technique, Purple Firmament Sword Scripture, Peacock Visualization Deduction, 10,000 experience points per time experience points, 608, 950, 000, after seeing the changes in the experience points panel, Jiang Xi's expression became even more surprised. His sword domain had been successfully upgraded to the Sword Tao. He had spent 1/3 of this year hunting those lone spirits of Tao outside 9 Firmament City. The experience points he had gained had exceeded 1.5 billion. And these experience points had been used up by him in this year. In total, in order to deduce the Sword Tao, he had used up more than 2.5 billion experience points. Now, he had finally received his reward. Of course, this was not without some help. If it were not for the enlightenment at the Green Lotus altar and the Sword Tao inscriptions left by Lu Yen, the Sword Tao deduction would have consumed at least 5 billion experience points. In addition to his surprise, Jiang Xi also noticed the Sword Tao's upgrade experience points. 100 million EXP to level up, just as I expected. Because the Sword Tao is a special Tao technique, its amplitude limit is twice that of the rare Heaven and Earth Tao, so the upgrade experience points are also twice as much. Next, I just need to raise my strength. Because there were many big shots in 9 Heavens City, in order to guard against those who had nothing better to do, they liked to use their spiritual awareness to investigate others. Jiang Xi decided to let his clone on Earth's first moon increase the level of his Sword Tao experience. Before leaving Earth, he had prepared a large number of 10,000-year-old spiritual fruits for his clone. 2 words, enough. Now, Whether it was experience points or spiritual energy, they were nothing to him. However, because the avatar was still in the golden core stage, the efficiency of refining the 10,000-year-old spiritual fruit was not that high. It was estimated that it would take a month to refine 100 million points of spiritual energy. The time in the origin universe is 3.6 times that of the ancient Tao origin world. 1 month in the origin universe is only 8 or 9 days here. While Jiang Xi was calmly cultivating and improving himself. The river diagram of the Skyspan Mountain, on the vast continent where the Skyspan Mountain was located. The black-robed old man, Lord Shoshan, had been guarding these sky-piercing mountains for countless years. It wasn't just the human geniuses from the ancient Tao origin world who could enter this place. Other immortal Tao sects or cultivators with contributions could enter the corresponding sky-piercing mountains as long as they chose an inheritance altar. However, since everyone had nothing better to do, they wouldn't waste their time here unless they were confident that they could pass the trial. On this day, a figure suddenly appeared on the platform in front of the sky-piercing mountains. It was Ji Wei, the champion of the new 9 Regions Genius Tournament. Greetings, Lord Shoshan. The black-robed Lord Shoshan's attitude towards this human genius was much better. A trace of a smile appeared on his dignified face. It's only been a year, and you're already confident of passing the next trial? I had a breakthrough, so I had to come and try. Ji Wei's expression was calm. Go, the void universe sky-piercing mountain is empty. The Lord Shoshan nodded lightly. Ji Wei bowed to him and flew over. The Lord Shoshan's gaze was deep, but there was some anticipation. It's only been a year, and you've already broken through. The Void Universe Sky-Piercing Mountain has 2 special Tao arts, time and space. The difficulty of cultivating them at the same time is not lower than the Tao of saber, sword, spear, and axe. Because Ji Wei had already passed the first 2 trials, he could directly enter the 3rd trial. As time passed, Ji Wei lasted longer and longer on the Void Universe Sky-Piercing Mountain. The Lord Shoshan's expression gradually turned to surprise. Half an hour later, he laughed. You passed? Not bad, not bad. Although you can't compare to rare geniuses like Lu Yen and Carlet, you're second only to them. Yes, according to the Iron Mountain's request, we have to give those little fellows some stimulation. Competition is the best way to increase their strength. With a thought, he spread the news to the others. Soon, the news of Ji Wei passing the 3rd trial of the sky-piercing mountain spread among the geniuses. Everyone entered the sky-piercing mountain river painting immediately. In just a short while, more than 3,000 people gathered on the platform in front of the 44 sky-piercing mountains. It was bustling. Why is he so outstanding as a human genius? Even Ji Wei passed the 3rd trial. No matter how big the difference is, we have to pass the first trial, right? Lord Shoshan, I want to challenge the sky-piercing mountain. The group was filled with fighting spirit. The black-robed Lord Shoshan was expressionless as he shouted, line up, one by one. The geniuses immediately quieted down, but they still maintained their fighting spirit and lined up to challenge the mountain. The difficulty of each sky-piercing mountain was the same. Even if they didn't challenge the same mountain, they could still compare the difference in strength. Compared to a year ago, many of them had improved. However, their improvement wasn't enough to pass the first trial. They only lasted a little longer under the hands of the Lord Shoshan. Failure, failure, failure. In the end, they recognized the cruel reality. However, there were still people who succeeded. A girl in a red dress flew up the sky-piercing mountain. 10 minutes later, the Lord Shoshan smiled and said, Yan Jiufeng passed the first trial. Whoosh! Everyone was shocked. Then, everyone felt that it was natural, because Yan Jiufeng was second in the 9 Regions Genius Battle. She had almost passed the previous trial. As for Kuang Lang, who was 3rd in the 9 Regions Genius Battle, he gritted his teeth and had a cold expression. It was difficult for him to show the arrogance he had in the past. Why? They're both level 4 disciples of the Purple Heaven sect. I'm so far behind them. He had already tried to break through once, and had also failed. This year's 9 Regions Genius Battle was special. There were 3 level 4 disciples of the Purple Heaven sect, and the top 3 could all enter the level 4. Although he had gotten third, there were already people privately saying that Quang Lang was a lucky guy. Because the strength that Mu Ning and River Word displayed now was stronger than his. Of course, this didn't mean that he was weak. Compared to other geniuses, he could be ranked 5th in the sky-piercing mountain. This is not the result I wanted. Quang Lang, can't be worse than others. Just as Quang Lang was about to leave and cultivate, another figure appeared on the platform in front of the sky-piercing mountain. Jiang Xi is here. Chapter 354. Jiang Xi really didn't mean to be the last to arrive. He also received the news that Ji Wei had passed the 3rd stage. However, at that time, his sword Dao was at the final stage of perfection. In order to ensure that the final improvement could be carried out safely and smoothly, he put most of his attention on his clone. That was why he was a little late. Fortunately, the result was good. Sword Dao, 10th tier, 10.000/10.0000000, amplitude, 2000 times, Sword Dao. His Sword Dao had successfully reached the 10th tier of perfection. His spiritual power amplitude had also increased to 2000 times. Jiang Xi, you're the only one left. Yan Jiufeng also passed the 1st stage just now. Hurry up and show us what you've got. Mu Ning shouted. He also went to try just now, but unfortunately, he didn't pass the 2nd stage. Yan Jiufeng also passed the 1st stage. Jiang Xi was eager to try. If he didn't count the stages, there were now 3 people who had passed the stages. Ji Wei, Mu Ning, and Yan Jiufeng. Then let's see how strong I am now after reaching perfection in my sword Dao. Jiang Xi looked at the green lotus Skirich mountain. At this moment, the other geniuses were also looking at him. There weren't many people left in the queue to challenge the mountain. The only one who was truly strong was Jiang Xi. Could Jiang Xi succeed? Many people asked in their hearts. Under everyone's gaze, Jiang Xi walked in front of the mountain guard and bowed respectfully. Lord Mountain Guard, I want to challenge the mountain. Go ahead. There's no one on the green lotus Skirich mountain. The mountain guard nodded lightly. Jiang Xi flew away. The mountain guard's eyes were a little surprised. This little guy has a sharp sword Dao perfection intent on him. It seems like he has reached perfection in his sword Dao. It's only been a year, and he has cultivated from the sword domain to the sword Dao. And he has even reached perfection. He hadn't seen such a situation in millions of years. A little bit of anticipation rose in his heart again under normal circumstances. When a cultivator's Dao of heaven and earth reached perfection, the Daoist rhymes on his body would be restrained. It would be difficult for others to see his Dao technique realm. Others might not be able to see Jiang Xi's Dao technique realm, but the mountain guardian could. Otherwise, he would not have guarded these heaven-span mountains for the human race for countless years. Over here, Jiang Xi quickly arrived at the green lotus heaven-span mountain and ascended the stairs. After stepping onto the first empty platform, he entered the illusion. It was still that endless mountain range. The gatekeeper wore armor and carried a long sword on his back as he stood in the air. You again. Those 8 little fellows didn't make any progress at all. I advise you to. That's not right. Have you perfected your sword Dao? The gatekeeper originally had a calm expression, but he was suddenly shocked. It had only been a year. I made a small breakthrough. Jiang Xi smiled. He didn't intend to hide his breakthrough. At his current height, he was no longer in a situation where he had to be cautious. The upper echelons of the human race looked at talent. The better he performed, the more heaven-defying he was, the better resources he would receive. Ha, an interesting little fellow has finally appeared. The gatekeeper gave a rare laugh. Then, he said seriously, same rules as before. Our cultivation levels are the same. My Tao techniques will remain at the ordinary first tier of the great Tao realm. However, I'm using sword intent. Its offensive power isn't something an ordinary great Tao can compare to. Come on. Jiang Xi's fighting spirit was also high, and he was not afraid at all. The slaughtering shadow sword was covered in a layer of sword shadows. Like dense clouds, it suddenly expanded to 10,000 zhang long. The way of the sword. Take the initiative to attack. The mighty sword shadow attacked the guardian who was clad in battle armor. The gatekeeper laughed out loud as well. He unsheathed the sword on his back, and a towering sword will swept out. Boom! Boom! The sword light surged and swept through the illusory space. The mountains below crumbled one after another, and rubble filled the air. Whoosh! The two figures were locked in battle in the air. Clang! Clang! The weapons clashed continuously, causing the space to tremble violently. It was definitely a head-on battle. Both of their cultivation levels were maintained at the perfected nascent soul realm. In terms of Tao techniques, although the gatekeeper was at the first tier of sword intent, according to the rules, he could only unleash the power of an ordinary first tier of the great Tao realm. In terms of spiritual power amplitude, it would be 1,900 times. As for Jiang Xi, he could unleash his strongest strength to his heart's content. The 10th tier of the Sword Tao realm had a maximum amplitude of 2,000 times. It seemed like there wasn't much difference, but in a battle between experts, 0.1 times was often enough to determine the outcome. Moreover, there was a difference of 100 times. Ha, great! Jiang Xi's figure flashed and twisted in the air as he attacked with all his might. In addition, he also had the Tao of Fire. This time, it was the gatekeeper's turn to defend. Swoosh! During the battle, Jiang Xi found an opportunity to kill the gatekeeper with a swing of his sword. You killed a late-stage nascent soul cultivator, fake. Experience points plus 380, success. Although he had expected it, Jiang Xi was still overjoyed. Buzz, the space changed drastically. Everything was restored to its original state. The gatekeeper who was just killed reappeared in front of Jiang Xi. Not bad. Although you still can't compare to those 1-in-a-million-years sword geniuses, as long as you maintain this speed of improvement, you will catch up. I believe that you will catch up to them sooner or later. The gatekeeper said with a chuckle. Many thanks. Jiang Xi cupped his hands in thanks, then disappeared. Space changed, and his figure reappeared on the first platform of the Green Lotus Heavenly Mountain. Then he stepped on the stone steps again and rushed toward the second stage. After entering the second stage's illusion, what surprised Jiang Xi was that the gatekeeper was actually still the one from the first stage. He looked exactly the same. Don't be surprised. It will be me in the future. The gatekeeper chuckled. Then the battle began again. At the same time, below the mountains. A group of geniuses was waiting, basically all waiting for Jiang Xi's results. The mountain keeper suddenly smiled and said, Jiang Xi also cleared the first stage. Immediately, there was another round of shock all around. Another one. Not counting the stages, there are already 4 people in the top 10 who have succeeded. This freak likes to hide his strength in the 9 regions genius battle, then erupt. I wonder if it will be the same this time. I think it's possible, everyone discussed animatedly. What made everyone heave a sigh of relief was that when Jiang Xi's figure flew back from the Green Lotus Heavenly Mountain, the mountain keeper did not speak again. This meant that Jiang Xi failed in the second stage. However, the 6 geniuses in the top 10 who had not succeeded yet had extremely complicated feelings. People like Imo Hong, Li Xianxian, Lin Ling, blood child, and Feng Lu either had bitter expressions or high fighting spirit, unwilling to admit defeat. And the remaining Kuang Lang became a special case. Because he was third place, a Purple Heaven sect fourth firmament disciple. Furthermore, his strength was almost the same as Jiang Xi back then. Now, Jiang Xi had already far surpassed him. Jiang Xi, not bad. Mu Ning laughed loudly. Congratulations. Yan Jiufen and the other geniuses also had people congratulating Jiang Xi. Jiang Xi nodded in return one by one. After the commotion, everyone did not waste precious time and left the Heavenly Mountain River diagram. Chapter 355. The news of Jiang Xi and Yan Jiufen passing the first stage of the sky-piercing mountain did not cause much of a stir in Nine Heavens City. After all, there were many immortal Tao experts. Two nascent soul cultivators were not worthy of much attention. Nine Heavens City, Wine Sword Immortal's huge palace. A 3D image was suspended in the main hall. It showed the battle scene of Jiang Xi passing the first stage of the sky-piercing mountain. Wine Sword Immortal and Immortal Ping watched carefully. As expected of big brother Zhongli. His eyes are still sharp. In just a year, this young man has not only completed the domain transformation, he has also reached the perfection realm. His sword Tao cultivation speed is much faster than big brother's back then. Immortal Ping was shocked. Wine Sword Immortal laughed and did not show the doubts hidden in his heart. He could not say that he had made an error in judgment, right? According to his estimation, Jiang Xi should need 3 to 5 years to step onto the sword Tao. Then, he would pass the first stage in 10 years and the third stage in 30 years. He did not expect Jiang Xi to reach such heights in just a year. A pure sword Tao could go from the sword domain to the sword Tao and reach the perfection realm in a year? How many years had it been? Interesting, interesting. Wine Sword Immortal opened his shirt and drank wine. He shook his head and hummed lightly. Jiang Xi sat cross-legged on the stone bed in the stone house. He thought back to his battle in the second stage of the Green Lotus Sky-Piercing Mountain. In the second stage of the Sky-Piercing Mountain, the Guardian's Tao technique is equivalent to an ordinary second-level Great Tao. His spiritual energy amplitude is 2,800 times, while mine is 2,000 times. Not only is there a difference in spiritual energy amplitude, but in terms of battle techniques, I am also much weaker. He could clearly feel that the Guardian's strength in the second stage had increased by a level. And his battle techniques were richer. Many of his moves were impossible to guard against. Jiang Xi understood that the Guardian's battle techniques in the first stage were not bad. After all, they were the same person. It was only because he had the upper hand in the first stage to a large extent, it could be said that he won with strength, making it difficult for the Guardian to use his full strength. After this round of investigation, Jiang Xi knew that the practical application of Tao techniques was still his shortcoming. Senior Wine Sword Immortal, the tune of 10,000 swords that you advised me to buy is the basic application manual of the Green Lotus Sword Tao. I didn't have enough money and points last time, but I have enough this time. After clearing the first stage, due to the tenfold reward from the novice stage, you'll receive 1,000 points straight away. Meanwhile, the tune of 10,000 swords only requires 88 points. With that in mind, Jiang Xi connected to the Omniscient Eye network through his communication bead and entered the Purple Heaven Sect's treasure vault. Search for tune of 10,000 swords. Then, he placed an order to buy it. Since it was a cultivation technique manual, it was a text message. The Purple Heaven Sect's treasure pavilion directly sent the entire melody of 10,000 swords to Jiang Xi through the Eye of Heaven network. Relying on his powerful spiritual sense, Riverward quickly finished reading the contents of the entire ancient book and memorized it by heart. Wonderful, wonderful. Sword Tao can be used like this. This move can be used like this. It seems that the way I used the sword Tao in the past was too crude. Jiang Xi's mind was completely immersed in the melody of 10,000 swords. It was like when he was in school. He learned a lot of theoretical knowledge and became a theoretical emperor, but in the end, his actual practice was worlds apart. He was somewhat similar in terms of sword Dao now. His Dao technique realm was high, but in a real battle, he could not fully unleash the strength of this realm. The melody of 10,000 swords was the analysis and comprehension of the first three transformations of the Green Lotus Sword Dao by the sword sect genius Lu Yan 8 million years ago. At the same time, it included various basic applications of sword Dao. Lu Yan is indeed a one-in-a-million sword Dao genius. Every transformation of the Green Lotus is extremely mysterious. Even a Dao immortal would find it difficult to fully comprehend it. Yet, he only used 3 sets of sword techniques to completely display the first 3 transformations of the Green Lotus. This is really good stuff. Jiang Xi's eyes lit up. What surprised him even more was that after he memorized the melody of 10,000 swords by heart, the words melody of 10,000 swords appeared in the cultivation technique column on the experience panel. Cultivation technique, Purple Heaven Sword Sutra, Peacock Visualization, Melody of 10,000 Swords. It meant that this was a cultivation technique manual that even the experience panel recognized and was extremely valuable. Immediately after, he tried to deduce the Sword Dao once more. Let's deduce it once with the Purple Firmament Sword Sutra, Sword Dao, and Melody of 10,000 Swords. A moment later, the deduction was completed. There were no obvious changes. However, Jiang Xi could vaguely sense that he gained some insights in his mind and a deeper understanding of the application of Sword Dao. It was effective. As expected, by deducing relevant applicable Dao techniques, he could improve his ability to use Dao techniques in a practical way. Jiang Xi was elated. If he continued deducing as such, his practical application of Sword Dao would gradually improve. The next cultivation direction would be to comprehend and deduce the melody of 10,000 swords to improve the application of Sword Dao. At the same time, I'll continue trying to fuse the Dao of Sword and Dao of Li Fire. Ever since his Dao of Li Fire was perfected, he had been trying to fuse Dao techniques once more but to no avail. Right now, he had to settle for the next best thing, fusing 2 Dao techniques instead of 3. He believed that the fusion of 2 Dao techniques of heaven and earth would be much stronger than the original 3 low-level Dao techniques. After that, Jiang Xi really stopped paying attention to the outside world. Apart from leaving the city for 10 days every month to hunt spirits of Dao, the rest of his time was devoted to cultivation. As the saying went, cultivation was timeless. Focusing on cultivation was one aspect. Another aspect was the long lifespan. It was easy to overlook the passage of time. Of the 3,600 geniuses who entered the ancient Dao source world to cultivate, more than 300 died in the first year. In the second year, more than 200 died because of hunting spirits of Dao. The rate of death was decreasing. In this year, Kuang Lang finally passed the first stage of the sky-piercing mountain. However, he no longer had the right to be arrogant. He had fallen behind by so much, so he had to work harder in the third year. Blood Child, Mo Hong, Li Xianxian, Lin Ling, and Feng Lu all passed the first stage of the sky-piercing mountain. At the same time, due to the difference in time between the ancient Dao source world and the original universe, Jiang Xi's clone in the original universe finally completed the nurturing of the golden core and cultivated to the nascent soul realm after 10 years. His trump cards gradually became stronger. In the fourth year, the top 360 geniuses of the 9 regions genius tournament also began to pass the first stage of the sky-piercing mountain. As for the geniuses at the bottom of the rankings, apart from those who had already died, they were also working hard. The competition continued, and no one dared to relax. In the next few years, the others more or less tried to pass the sky-piercing mountain. Some succeeded, and some failed. Only Jiang Xi didn't make a move. He maintained his own cultivation pace and wasn't affected by others. In the blink of an eye, 10 years had passed in the ancient Tao source world, and 36 years had passed in the original universe. During this time, Jiang Daodu experienced another deep slumber, and her cultivation rose to the nascent soul realm. This made Jiang Xi sigh. The difficulty of cultivation. Chapter 356. In fact, Jiang Xi sometimes wondered if this girl was the reincarnation of an immortal Tao big shot. He had worked so hard to reach this stage, but Jiang Dudu only needed to sleep for a while to level up. That was how it was written in novels and books. Something like a ruthless emperor. However, Jiang Xi was happy to see this. In the future, he wouldn't have to spend time and energy to help Jiang Dudu improve her strength. In addition, Xian Tian and Li Baibai, who had reached the golden core stage a long time ago, had also broken through to the nascent soul stage in these 36 years. One of them was cultivating in the Tsangyin sect, while the other was cultivating in the Tao Alliance's Temple of Time. Compared to when they were on Earth, their speed of improvement was a little faster. After all, with the guidance of their master, they would take fewer detours. Everyone was improving, and Jiang Xi naturally wouldn't fall behind. In the past 10 years, he had been deducing Tao techniques and comprehending the melody of 10,000 swords. Now, his control and use of sword Tao had become more and more skillful. At the same time, he was also trying to fuse sword Tao and Li fire Tao. He never gave up. On this day, Jiang Xi returned from hunting Tao rune spirits outside Nine Heavens City. He continued to try to fuse sword Tao and Li fire Tao. The Tao runes of the two Tao techniques circled around him, clearly separated. And he was using all kinds of methods to try to fuse the two Tao techniques. At the same time, he was silently deducing in his heart. After an unknown period of time, suddenly, Jiang Xi was stunned. The two completely unrelated Taoist rhymes suddenly showed signs of merging at this moment. Experience points panel has been updated. Please check it. When the pleasant notification sounded in his mind, Jiang Xi's eyes were immediately filled with surprise. The experience points panel was updated. Was there a new function? Or something else? He quickly opened it. Cultivation, True Body, Nascent Soul, Advanced Stage 1. 06 million/1. 06 million. Clone, Nascent Soul, Advanced Stage 1. 06 million/1. 06 million, Tao Technique, Sword Tao, 10th level, 10 million/10 million, Li Fire Tao, 10th level, 50 million/50 million, Gale Domain, 10th level, 5 million/5 million, Amplitude, 2000 times, Sword Tao, Secret Technique, Tao Fusion Technique, Tao of Sword, Tao of Fire, 12 million, Amplitude 1, Martial Arts, Purple Cloud Sword Scripture, Peacock Visualization, Melody of 10,000 Swords Deduction, 10,000 EXP per UCXP, 1-832, 430, 000. When Jiang Xi saw the changes in the EXP panel, he was even more surprised. An additional secret technique pane appeared. The first secret technique was the Tao Fusion Technique. Back then, the Tao Fusion that he had blindly pondered had actually evolved into a secret technique after the Taoist rhymes of the two Taos of heaven and earth had fused slightly. And it's a secret technique that can be leveled up with EXP. The fusion of the Tao of Sword and the Tao of Fire requires 200 million experience points to level up. It's still within an acceptable range. The effect of the Tao Fusion Technique is displayed too. Amplitude x1, multiplied by 1. In other words, after leveling up the Tao Fusion Technique, my spiritual energy amplitude will increase again. It's very possible. After all, before the Tao Technique reached the level of the Tao of heaven and earth, a crude Tao Technique fusion technique could cause the might of the Tao Technique to increase explosively. Jiang Xi's mind spun rapidly as he quickly connected the dots. Surprise, this was a huge surprise. The Tao Fusion Technique was a wondrous technique that could increase one's strength. Ever since the Tao of Fire was perfected and flawless, it could not be used anymore. Now that it appeared on the EXP panel, there would be unlimited possibilities in the future. Next, level up. Jiang Xi did not let the surprise get to his head. He continued to be cautious. He let his clone in the original universe refine large amounts of spiritual fruits to increase the Tao fusion technique's level and experience points. 9 Heaven City, Wine Sword Immortal's Palace. Wine Sword Immortal would hold a class once a month. Although each time he taught Tao techniques, it was always full of people. However, after teaching for so long, he had only taken in one disciple. Alright, this month's class ends here. See you next month. Wine Sword Immortal did not care about his image. He lay on his side on the throne in the main hall and waved his hand, signaling the cultivators who came to listen to the class to leave. Everyone bowed respectfully and left. When the main hall was empty, he said to a Tao integration stage youth standing beside him, Yiming, prepare to receive the guests. Although he had been cultivating with Wine Sword Immortal for a year, Qin Yiming still could not figure out his master's style of doing things. However, he did not dare to be negligent and immediately set up the main hall. Sure enough, after a short while, a person flew in from outside the hall on a 5-colored auspicious cloud. Zhongli, you're finally willing to come out. A hearty laugh sounded at the same time. Wine Sword Immortal greeted him with a smile. It was a man in a green robe with disheveled hair. It was Immortal Ilyang, who had been supervising the 9 regions genius battle. Soon, Immortal Ping also arrived. The 3 of them were old friends. Soon, they sat down in the hall and talked about the past tens of thousands of years ago, accompanied by good wine and delicious food. This time, he drank for half a month. After a mess of cups and plates, Immortal Ilyang smiled drunkenly. Only your wine can make me feel drunk. Of course. Although my wine is not a 100,000-year-old Guanghan wine, it is still a rare good wine in the world. Wine Sword Immortal chuckled. I remember that you still have 3,000 years of lifespan left, right? Immortal Ilyang suddenly thought of something and frowned. Immortal Ping gave him a look. Why did he have to mention that of all people? Unexpectedly, Wine Sword Immortal laughed in a carefree manner. So what if I still have 3,000 years? I've already lived for almost 100,000 years. Life and death are no longer important to me. You should let it go. After all, it's been 50,000 years. Immortal Ilyang sighed. Let it go. How can I let it go if that Yao doesn't die? I saw him kill Rong, with my own eyes. I hate that I can't drink his blood, eat his flesh, and burn his bones to ashes. Wine Sword Immortal's face became ferocious and terrifying. It was completely different from his usual carefree and heroic appearance. Immortal Ping's face was filled with worry. She glared at Immortal Ilyang. Sigh. Immortal Ilyang felt helpless. He also wanted to help his old friend get rid of his inner demon. But now, it seemed that Wine Sword Immortal's inner demon would be hard to get rid of. That was because that Yao Dao Immortal had already become a Yao Dao Lord. Let's drink, let's drink. Wine Sword Immortal waved his hand and returned to his carefree and unrestrained self. He hid many things in his heart. When Immortal Ping saw this, she hurriedly changed the topic. She smiled and asked Immortal Ilyang, haven't you always been working under True Monarch Iron Mountain? Why did you come to 9 Heaven City? Don't tell me you're here to see me. If you wanted to see me, you would have come a long time ago, Wine Sword Immortal added. Immortal Ilyang shook his head and chuckled. It's all because of those youths in the 9 Regions Genius Tournament. According to the rules, if the youths in this tournament are successful in their cultivation, they will all be under True Monarch Iron Mountain. They've already been cultivating in the ancient Tao origin world for 10 years. True Monarch Iron Mountain specially asked me to come and see how they're doing. Chapter 357. The three immortals changed the topic to the youths in the 9 Regions Genius Tournament. Immortal Ping asked, "What's the situation like?" Immortal Yu Yang smiled. "This tournament is different from the past. There are many good seedlings. Among them, Ji Wei is the most valued by true monarch Iron Mountain. He passed the 4th trial a year ago." Speaking of Ji Wei, Immortal Yu Yang's smile widened. Then, he continued, Mu Ning, Yan Jiufeng, Kuang Lang, Mo Hong, and Blood Child also passed the 2nd trial. The rate of improvement of these youths is the fastest in the past million years. Perhaps 1 or 2 Tribulation Transcender powerhouses will emerge. There were differences between Tribulation Transcenders. 1 Tribulation Transcender and 9 Tribulation Transcender were definitely different. Wine Sword Immortal nodded. Indeed. Immortal Yu Yang shook his head. It's just that I don't understand Jiang Xi's performance. If he could pass the 1st trial in his 1st year, he should have passed the 2nd trial a long time ago. However, he hasn't done anything in the past 10 years. Everyone else is working hard to obtain the inheritance altar. I don't know what he's thinking. He's not in a hurry at all. Immortal Ping smiled. You can ask Big Brother Zhongli about this. He knows Jiang Xi quite well. Oh. Immortal Yu Yang looked at Wine Sword Immortal. Wine Sword Immortal took a sip of wine and said, "To be honest, I can't see through him anymore. 10 years ago, I gave him some pointers and told him to buy the tune of 10,000 swords to improve his sword technique. I didn't expect him to become like this after buying it." Immortal Yu Yang's expression changed. Did he take a wrong path and focus on sword technique? Wine Sword Immortal hesitated. That shouldn't be, right? Immortal Yu Yang said, "That's what I'm worried about. It seems that I'll have to remind him when we leave. The next 30 years in the ancient Tao origin world is the best time to build a foundation," Immortal Yu Yang said. He scanned 9 Heaven City with his spiritual sense and saw Jiang Xi sitting cross-legged on a roof. After Jiang Xi's clone reached the nascent soul stage, the efficiency of refining 10,000-year-old spirit fruits had increased greatly. In just 20 days, he had refined 200 million points of spiritual energy. He looked at the changes in his EXP panel: Tao Fusion Technique, Tao of Sword, Tao of Fire, 20.000/200.000/000, Amplitude 2, Amplitude 2. As expected, after the Tao fusion of the Tao of the Sword and the Tao of the Leaf Fire reaches perfection, the Tao of the Leaf Fire Tao will become extremely powerful. My spiritual energy amplitude can be directly multiplied by 2 times on top of the original foundation. I wonder how many times the Tao fusion technique of 3 Taos of heaven and earth will be amplified. Jiang Xi was looking forward to it. When I use the Tao fusion technique, my current amplitude can increase to 4,000 times. It's a good opportunity to challenge the Heavenspan Mountain and test my strength. Immediately, Jiang Xi used his spiritual sense to enter the sky-reaching mountain and river, painting through the communication bead. They appeared on the vast continent where the 44 sky-reaching mountains were located. He came before the Lord Mountain Guardian and bowed, "Greetings, Lord Mountain Guardian." The Lord Mountain Guardian opened his eyes. "Oh, it's Jiang Xi. I remember that you haven't been here for 10 years. The youths in your batch have all improved a lot. You have to work hard. I've been polishing my Tao before, so I don't want to be distracted." Jiang Xi smiled. "Yes, not bad. The Green Lotus sky-reaching mountain happens to be empty. Hurry up and challenge it." The Lord Mountain Guardian nodded. Jiang Xi bowed again before flying toward the Green Lotus sky-reaching mountain. He's been cultivating in seclusion for 10 years. I wonder what kind of breakthrough he made this time. Could it be that he comprehended sword intent? The Lord Mountain Guardian could not help but think of this. Then, he shook his head. For thousands of years, only Lu Yan has been able to comprehend sword intent in just 10 years in the ancient Tao origin world. On the other side, Jiang Xi quickly arrived at the foot of the green lotus sky-reaching mountain and looked at the stone tablet again. Then, he quickly climbed up the stone steps to the platform of the second stage. The space changed, and his spiritual body fell into an illusion. It was still the same endless mountain range, and the armored guardian stood in the air with a sword on his back. "It's you. We haven't seen each other for 10 years. Are you confident that you can pass my second stage this time?" The guardian said in a low voice, "Why don't you give it a try?" Jiang Xi said with a faint smile. He directly unsheathed his sword, and a cold sword light flashed. "You've reached perfection in the Tao of the sword. You can't beat me like this." The guardian shook his head, and a long sword appeared in his hand as sword intent rose. "Oh. Is that so?" Jiang Xi chuckled again. A dark red sword shadow suddenly appeared on the slaughtering shadow sword, faintly hiding under the dense sword shadow of the Tao of the sword. "What? Tao fusion technique? Impossible." Even tribulation transcenders would find it difficult to completely grasp the Tao of the heaven and earth level Tao fusion technique. The guardian's expression changed. "Come and fight!" Jiang Xi shouted. The sword light whistled, and the long sword followed his figure, becoming tens of thousands of feet long. The sword shadow formed by the fusion of the Tao of the sword and the Tao of the fire was mighty, and its power spread throughout the entire space. As soon as the guardian saw this momentum, his expression became incomparably solemn. The soaring sword intent turned into all kinds of moves and fiercely collided with Jiang Xi's sword. The majestic impact swept through the entire space, destroying heaven and earth. 4,000 times spiritual energy amplitude versus 2,800 times spiritual energy amplitude. There was an absolute gap in strength. Swish! Riverward used less than 10 sword strikes to find the gatekeeper's flaw. With a thrust of his sword, he pierced through the other party's forehead. The second stage passed. Buzz! The space changed dramatically, and the space that had collapsed during the battle between the two returned to normal. The guardian also revived. The guardian said in a grave tone, "This time, you won with strength again. With your fighting skills, you will definitely lose in the next stage. Watch carefully." Jiang Xi smiled and disappeared. Then, he walked along the stone steps toward the platform of the third stage. At the same time, in Wine Sword Immortal's palace, the three immortals were still drinking and reminiscing about the past. Suddenly, Immortal Yu Yang frowned as he received a message. Jiang Xi just passed the second stage of the Sky Span Mountain. That kid is finally willing to move. Oh. Let's go and take a look. Wine Sword Immortal was also interested. Immortal Ping smiled. She naturally followed Wine Sword Immortal's opinion. Then, with a thought, the three entered the Sky Span Mountain River painting with their spiritual senses. Their figures were hidden in the starry sky of the continent where the Sky Span Mountain was located, and they looked at the green lotus Sky Span Mountain. The third stage. Jiang Xi's figure fell into the third stage's illusory realm. As the guardian had just been killed by Jiang Xi in the second stage, he only snorted. "You won't be able to pass this stage with just the Tao fusion technique." Jiang Xi's expression was solemn and he did not speak. The guardian's Tao power in the third stage was equivalent to an ordinary third-level Great Tao. In terms of spiritual energy amplitude, it was 3,700 times. After he used the Tao fusion technique, his spiritual energy amplitude was 4,000 times. From this point of view, he had the advantage. However, even a lion would use its full strength to hunt a rabbit. He would not underestimate any opponent. Therefore, he took the initiative to meet the guardian with his sword. Chapter 358. In the eyes of many tribulation transcender powerhouses, Jiang Xi was a very good successor, and at the same time, he could help them a bit. As a young cultivator, being able to pass the third trial of the Heavenspan Mountain after cultivating for 10 years in the ancient Tao source world was already very talented. If there were no accidents in the future, it wouldn't be a big problem for him to reach the Tribulation Transcender realm. However, these Tribulation Transcender powerhouses also understood that they were just there to accompany him. Because among the Tribulation Transcender powerhouses of the Purple Heaven sect in 9 Firmament City, the strength and fame of Wine Sword Immortal and Sword Immortal Nangong far surpassed them. With these two immortals, Jiang Xi's chances of becoming their disciple were very small. Compared to Wine Sword Immortal and Sword Immortal Nangong. In the past 50,000 years, Wine Sword Immortal had been in a depressed state and didn't teach anyone. Sword Immortal Nangong became the most famous Tribulation Transcender powerhouse in 9 Firmament City. Some people even guessed that if Wine Sword Immortal hadn't suddenly announced 10 years ago, Jiang Xi would most likely have chosen Sword Immortal Nangong as his disciple. But now, there was a change. Even though Wine Sword Immortal had been silent for 50,000 years, his popularity hadn't decreased, and he was still the #1 immortal. This time, Jiang Xi will definitely become my disciple. Sword Immortal Nangong was very confident, and his words were like a challenge to Wine Sword Immortal. In a palace near 9 Firmaments Palace. Wine Sword Immortal was leisurely drinking wine and singing in the attic, but his singing was out of tune. Immortal Ping was still the only audience. After Wine Sword Immortal finished singing, she smiled and said, "Big brother Zhongli, Sword Immortal Nangong has spoken. Aren't you worried at all? This kind of thing can't be rushed. That Nangong guy has been fighting with me for 10,000 years. I didn't expect him to still be like this. Let him be in the limelight first," Wine Sword Immortal said with a smile. The next day, Wine Sword Immortal's lesson started again. Sword Immortal Nangong seemed to have purposely changed the time of the Dharma lesson to this day. According to the rules of becoming a disciple, after the young cultivators of the ancient Tao source world passed the third trial of the Heavenspan Mountain. If they wanted to become the disciple of a powerhouse, they had to be under that powerhouse's tutelage. Jiang Xi didn't know what Jiang Duda had done, nor did he know that he was being targeted by so many Tribulation Transcender powerhouses. Early in the morning, he tied up his long hair that had not been cut for 10 years, tidied up his clothes, carried a long sword on his back, and went out. Walking on the flagstone streets of 9 Firmament City, he headed toward the palaces of Tribulation Transcender powerhouses near 9 Firmaments Palace. He passed by the residences of Tribulation Transcender powerhouses one after another. Finally, he stopped in front of the Wine Sword Immortal's palace and walked in with steady steps. Sigh, the group of Tribulation Transcender powerhouses who still had a glimmer of hope sighed. But he lost wholeheartedly, who asked him to be the Wine Sword Immortal. 50,000 years ago, the Wine Sword Immortal had dominated the 9 stellar domains and was known as the #1 immortal in terms of popularity. If it wasn't for an accident that led to the birth of a heart demon, he would have long become a great Tao immortal. After all, the Sword Tao of the Liquor Sword Immortal was already on par with that of a Tao immortal 50,000 years ago. Only Sword Immortal Nangong remained silent for a long while before shaking his head with a smile. Being able to cultivate to such a high level, he naturally wouldn't get angry over such things. He just didn't want to lose to the Wine Sword Immortal. Because it was an open class, Jiang Xi didn't have any restrictions and directly walked in. At this time, the Wine Sword Immortal was sitting at the front of the hall and hadn't started his lecture yet. When he saw Jiang Xi walk in, his expression didn't change at all. But the other cultivators who came to listen to the lecture were in an uproar. Recently, Jiang Xi's name had been known by many cultivators in 9 Firmament City below the immortal Tao realm. Many people had heard that this young man who had just arrived in the ancient Tao origin world had passed the third trial of the sky-piercing mountain a few days ago and was quite talented. Obviously, this was the first time Jiang Xi had come to listen to a lecture, so his purpose here was self-evident. They were all guessing whether the Wine Sword Immortal would accept Jiang Xi as his disciple. Under everyone's gaze, Jiang Xi calmly found a place to sit down cross-legged and waited for the Wine Sword Immortal to start his lecture. After about 15 minutes, the Wine Sword Immortal drank a mouthful of wine and started his lecture. Today, let's talk about what is a sword. This sentence instantly stunned all the cultivators in the hall. Cultivators who could enter the ancient Tao origin world naturally had good talent and comprehension, and they all came here to listen to the lecture with swords as their weapon of choice. What was a sword? This question couldn't be more simple. Was there even a need to explain it? The Wine Sword Immortal didn't care about everyone's doubts and continued, I'm sure some people will say that a sword is a type of weapon, a type of ritual tool, or something else. Actually, that's not wrong, but the essence of a sword isn't mentioned. A sword isn't just an object, it's a life with sentience and emotions. If you use a sword to kill people, your sword will be tainted with baleful aura and brutality. If you use a sword to do good, your sword will be tainted with righteousness and peace. Once the sword is tainted with these emotions, it will be like a person and possess the 7 emotions and 6 desires. Many troubles in the world are caused by emotions. If we treat a sword as a life form, in the end, we return to the essence. The sword is the heart. If you can reach this level, your sword Tao won't be too bad. Alright, this lecture ends here. All of you can leave now. See you next time. Everyone came back to their senses and realized that 3 days had already passed. They were completely immersed in the Wine Sword Immortal's words. Jiang Xi was also immersed in the lecture. As expected of the Wine Sword Immortal. What was the theory of the sword? It was as if he had been enlightened, and his understanding of the way of the sword had deepened. When everyone was about to leave, Jiang Xi took a deep breath and walked to the front of the hall. Since he had already made his decision, he wouldn't hesitate. Under everyone's gaze, he knelt on the ground and said, Disciple Jiang Xi is willing to take Immortal as my master. Jiang Xi's action caused another commotion. Everyone looked at the Wine Sword Immortal and wondered if this Immortal would take Jiang Xi as his disciple. Good, very good. The Wine Sword Immortal nodded lightly. All the cultivators were instantly filled with envy. The news of Jiang Xi successfully becoming the Wine Sword Immortal's disciple quickly spread. The geniuses had just been stimulated once, and this time, they were stimulated again. That was the Wine Sword Immortal, a 9th tribulation transcender who wasn't any weaker than a Tao Immortal. This Jiang Xi is really abnormal. Mu Ning muttered and continued to ponder over his next song. Granny once said that if the Wine Sword Immortal could reverse life and death, he would be a top-notch Tao Immortal. If Jiang Xi can become his disciple, his competitiveness will greatly increase in the future. Yan Jiufeng took a deep breath. Why did he improve so quickly? Kuang Lang found it hard to accept this news and was silent for a long time. The other geniuses were even crazier and worked hard to cultivate. However, it wasn't that easy to become the disciple of a tribulation transcender. They had to pass the 3rd trial of the sky-piercing mountain. And it was even more difficult to become the disciple of a powerhouse like the Wine Sword Immortal. It really depended on their mood. Chapter 359. Misty Mountain Immortal, past the 14th stage of the sky-piercing mountain. Thousand Flames Immortal, past the 16th stage of the sky-piercing mountain. Immortal Ping, past the 15th stage of the sky-piercing mountain. Sword Immortal Nangong, past the 19th stage of the sky-piercing mountain. Jiang Xi carefully browsed through the list. Although I have the experience points panel and don't have to worry about cultivating, choosing a master obviously has its benefits. Who should I choose? Jiang Xi's gaze fell on the Wine Sword Immortal's information. Wine Sword Immortal, past the 20th stage of the sky-piercing mountain, this level of strength had already surpassed most Tao Immortals. Of course, strength was only secondary. Towards the Wine Sword Immortal, he was filled with gratitude. When he first came to the ancient Tao source world, if the Wine Sword Immortal hadn't told him to buy the melody of 10,000 swords, he would have been able to improve his cultivation. He was afraid that he would need to spend a long time exploring and fighting in order to improve his combat skills. This was also the benefit of having a master. With a knowledgeable person guiding him, he would be able to avoid many detours. Moreover, after I finish cultivating in the ancient Tao source world, I'll have to go to the Purple Heaven sect's headquarters. At that time, I'll have to find an opportunity to return the Purple Heaven sword scripture to the sect. This is a dangerous mission. I'll take a Tribulation Transcender as my master first. It'll be safer in the future. Thinking up to here, Jiang Xi suddenly shook his head and smiled bitterly. Taking a master was just an insurance. Because there was another question that he had to ask. Back then, he had been tricked by his master, Taoist Gu, into swearing an oath to return the Purple Heaven sword scripture to the Purple Heaven sect within 100 years. The key was this the 100 years he had experienced, or was it the 100 years of the original universe's normal flow of time? If it was the latter, then he was done for. This question had always been hidden in Jiang Xi's heart. Occasionally, he would feel apprehensive. Before the end of the 9 Regions Genius Tournament, he hadn't thought that there would be a time difference between the original universe and the ancient Tao source world now. He could only wait for the original universe's 100 years to arrive. He had made the oath in the year 95 of the new moon, and it was now the 154th year of the new moon. According to the time difference between the ancient Tao source world and the original universe, there was still 41 years of the original universes. In other words, the ancient Tao source world's time. In the ancient Tao source world was a Tao source world's time. If I break the oath of the Tao, then my Taoist techniques will no longer be able to use inch force. This cheap master was really a big scammer. Damn it, Jiang Xi sometimes wondered why the Purple Heaven sect had so many big shots of the immortal Tao. Why would such an important inheritance like the Purple Cloud Sword Sutra be broken by Taoist Gu, a Tao integration cultivator? Was there any secret behind this? If there really is some secret, then I have to find a master to rely on. At the same time, in the Milky Way galaxy, planet Dongyuan. As the core life planet of the Milky Way galaxy, planet Dongyuan was even more prosperous. Because Jiang Xi was the lord of the Milky Way galaxy, the headquarters of the Mountain Sea Star Trade had been moved here more than 30 years ago. At this moment, in the Shanghai Interstellar Trade Headquarters in Anlin City on planet Dongyuan, Jiang Dudu, who had a slightly cold temperament, and a late-stage nascent soul female cultivator. Under the witness of the all-piercing eye, each of them left their own spiritual sense imprints on a document. Then, the late-stage nascent soul female cultivator smiled and said, "Junior sister Jiang, you are also a member of the Purple Heaven sect from now on." "Senior sister Yan, you must be joking. I'm not even an outer sect disciple now." Jiang Dudu smiled faintly. "Ha, with senior brother Jiang Xi here, as long as junior sister Jiang manages the Mountain Sea Star Trade well, it will be easy for you to become a core disciple of the Purple Heaven sect in the future." Yan Fei was quite friendly. "Thank you for your kind words, senior sister Yan." Jiang Dudu smiled. The two of them chatted for a while more before Yan Fei left the Mountain Sea Star Trade. After signing the agreement, Jiang Dudu felt like a stone had been lifted from her heart and she felt much more at ease. As a late-stage nascent soul cultivator from the Purple Heaven sect, Yan Fei's attitude towards her, a nascent soul cultivator, was very friendly. The reason was very simple. It was because Jiang Xi had passed the 3rd stage of the Skyspan Mountain in the ancient Tao origin world. The talent he had displayed had surpassed the other 2 4th Heaven young geniuses of the Purple Heaven sect. This news had already spread among the disciples of the Purple Heaven sect. Compared to Jiang Xi, Yan Fei was only a 1st Heaven disciple of the Purple Heaven sect. Her status was several levels lower. "Chairman, will the Mountain Sea Star Trade be a subsidiary of the Purple Heaven sect in the future?" Next to him, the general manager of the Mountain Sea Star Trade, Shen Wanxi, was still a little dizzy. Wen Yoxin and Wen Feng were also very excited. With the Purple Heavens sect behind them, the Mountain Sea Star trade would develop even faster in the future. That's right, but they will only take the dividends and can't interfere with the operation of the group, Jiang Dudu said with a smile. Jiang Dudu looked at the three of them. Yoxin, Wen Feng, Old Shen, now is not the time to relax. The Mountain Sea Star trade has now reached the scale of 10,000 supreme-grade spirit crystals. We have to reach 100,000 supreme-grade spirit crystals in 50 years. Are you confident? Yes. The Wen siblings and Shen Wanxi were full of motivation. After the three of them left, Jiang Dudu looked at the flowing stars in the night sky and gently clenched her fists. The ninth heaven of the Purple Heaven sect is coming soon. She was looking forward to the scene when Jiang Xi finished cultivating in the ancient Tao origin world and went to the headquarters of the Purple Heaven sect. The Nine Zones Genius Tournament was not the only way to become a disciple of the Purple Heaven sect. In addition to the outstanding disciples that the star regions usually sent to the Purple Heaven sect, there were also special talents that could enter the Purple Heaven sect. After all, not everyone was good at cultivation. And a huge immortal Tao sect could not only rely on powerful cultivators to maintain normal operations. He also needed various management type, business type, and other talented cultivators. Not only the top immortal Tao sects of the star regions, but even the 3 gates and 6 sects would conduct business activities. After all, cultivation was ultimately about money. This time, Jiang Dudu had done some work. She had made the Mountain Sea Star trade a subsidiary of the Purple Heaven sect and successfully entered the Purple Heaven sect. Of course, she was only an outer disciple now. If she wanted to enter the core and become a disciple of the 9th heaven of the Purple Heaven sect, she would need to continue working hard. If a disciple who specializes in business manages a star trade group with a scale of 100,000 supreme-grade spirit crystals, they can become a disciple of the 1st heaven of the Purple Heaven sect. 100,000 supreme-grade spirit crystals sounded like a small amount. If it was converted into low-grade spirit crystals, it would be a lot. 100 billion low-grade spirit crystals. If not for special circumstances, the first place of the 9 Zones Genius Tournament would only receive this amount of spirit crystals as a reward. They were the top geniuses selected from the billions of humans. For the Mountain Sea Star Trade Group, which had only been established 60 years ago, it would be very difficult to achieve this goal. In 9 Heaven City, the Tribulation Transcender powerhouses of the various sects who were qualified to teach the Purple Heaven sect were secretly competing with each other. 10 years ago, when Ji Wei had just passed the 3rd level, a similar situation had occurred. In the end, Ji Wei still became a disciple of a Tao immortal perfected lord. This made the Tribulation Transcender powerhouses sigh that they had missed a good disciple. And now, Jiang Xi had appeared. Chapter 360. In the eyes of many Tribulation Transcender powerhouses, Jiang Xi was a very good successor, and at the same time, he could help them a bit. As a young cultivator, being able to pass the 3rd trial of the Heavenspan Mountain after cultivating for 10 years in the ancient Tao Source world was already very talented. If there were no accidents in the future, it wouldn't be a big problem for him to reach the Tribulation Transcender realm. However, these Tribulation Transcender powerhouses also understood that they were just there to accompany him. Because among the Tribulation Transcender powerhouses of the Purple Heaven sect in 9 Firmament City, the strength and fame of Wine Sword Immortal and Sword Immortal Nangong far surpassed them. With these 2 immortals, Jiang Xi's chances of becoming their disciple were very small. Compared to Wine Sword Immortal and Sword Immortal Nangong. In the past 50,000 years, Wine Sword Immortal had been in a depressed state and didn't teach anyone. Sword Immortal Nangong became the most famous Tribulation Transcender powerhouse in 9 Firmament City. Some people even guessed that if Wine Sword Immortal hadn't suddenly announced 10 years ago, Jiang Xi would most likely have chosen Sword Immortal Nangong as his disciple. But now, there was a change. Even though Wine Sword Immortal had been silent for 50,000 years, his popularity hadn't decreased, and he was still the #1 immortal. This time, Jiang Xi will definitely become my disciple. Sword Immortal Nangong was very confident, and his words were like a challenge to Wine Sword Immortal. In a palace near Nine Firmaments Palace. Wine Sword Immortal was leisurely drinking wine and singing in the attic, but his singing was out of tune. Immortal Ping was still the only audience. After Wine Sword Immortal finished singing, she smiled and said, "Big brother Zhongli, Sword Immortal Nangong has spoken. Aren't you worried at all? This kind of thing can't be rushed. That Nangong guy has been fighting with me for 10,000 years. I didn't expect him to still be like this. Let him be in the limelight first," Wine Sword Immortal said with a smile. The next day, Wine Sword Immortal's lesson started again. Sword Immortal Nangong seemed to have purposely changed the time of the Dharma lesson to this day. According to the rules of becoming a disciple, after the young cultivators of the ancient Tao source world passed the third trial of the Heavenspan Mountain. If they wanted to become the disciple of a powerhouse, they had to be under that powerhouse's tutelage. Jiang Xi didn't know what Jiang Duda had done, nor did he know that he was being targeted by so many tribulation transcender powerhouses. Early in the morning, he tied up his long hair that had not been cut for 10 years, tidied up his clothes, carried a long sword on his back, and went out. Walking on the flagstone streets of Nine Firmaments City, he headed toward the palaces of tribulation transcender powerhouses near Nine Firmaments Palace. He passed by the residences of tribulation transcender powerhouses one after another. Finally, he stopped in front of the Wine Sword Immortal's palace and walked in with steady steps. Sigh, the group of tribulation transcender powerhouses who still had a glimmer of hope sighed. But he lost wholeheartedly, who asked him to be the Wine Sword Immortal. 50,000 years ago, the Wine Sword Immortal had dominated the 9 stellar regions of the Tao Alliance and was known as the #1 immortal in terms of popularity. If it wasn't for an accident that led to the birth of a heart demon, he would have long become a great Tao immortal. After all, the sword Tao of the Liquor Sword Immortal was already on par with that of a Tao immortal 50,000 years ago. Only Sword Immortal Nangong remained silent for a long while before shaking his head with a smile. Being able to cultivate to such a high level, he naturally wouldn't get angry over such things. He just didn't want to lose to the Wine Sword Immortal. Here, because it was an open class, Jiang Xi didn't have any restrictions and directly walked in. At this time, the Wine Sword Immortal was sitting at the front of the hall and had yet to start his lecture. Seeing Jiang Xi come in, his expression didn't change at all. But the other cultivators who came to listen to the lecture were in an uproar. Recently, Jiang Xi's name had been known by many cultivators in Nine Firmaments City below the immortal Tao realm. Many people had heard that this young man who had just arrived in the ancient Tao origin world had passed the third trial of the sky-piercing mountain a few days ago, and his talent was extraordinary. Obviously, this was the first time Jiang Xi had come to listen to a lecture, so his purpose here was self-evident. They were all guessing whether the Wine Sword Immortal would accept Jiang Xi as his disciple. Under everyone's gazes, Jiang Xi calmly found a place to sit down cross-legged and waited for the Wine Sword Immortal to teach him. After about 15 minutes, the Wine Sword Immortal drank a mouthful of wine and began his lecture. Today, let's talk about what is a sword. This sentence instantly stunned all the cultivators in the hall. Cultivators who could enter the ancient Tao origin world naturally had good talent and comprehension, and they all came here to listen to the lecture with swords as their weapon of choice. What was a sword? This question couldn't be more simple. Was there even a need to explain it? The Wine Sword Immortal didn't care about everyone's doubts and continued, "I'm sure some people will say that a sword is a type of weapon, or a type of ceremonial tool, or something else. Actually, that's not wrong, but the essence of a sword isn't mentioned. A sword isn't just an object, it's a life with sentience and emotions. If you use a sword to kill, your sword will be tainted with baleful aura and brutality. If you use a sword to do good, your sword will be tainted with righteousness and peace. Once the sword is tainted with these emotions, it will be like a person, possessing the 7 emotions and 6 desires. Many troubles in the world are caused by emotions. If we treat a sword as a life form, in the end, we return to the essence. The sword is the heart. If you can reach this level, your sword Tao won't be too bad. Alright, this lecture ends here. All of you can leave now. See you next time. Everyone came back to their senses and realized that 3 days had already passed. They were completely immersed in the Wine Sword Immortal's words. Jiang Xi was also immersed in the lecture. As expected of the Wine Sword Immortal, the theory of what was a sword enlightened him, and it deepened his understanding of the sword Tao. When everyone was about to leave, Jiang Xi took a deep breath and walked to the front of the hall. Since he had already made his decision, he wouldn't hesitate. Under everyone's gaze, he knelt on the ground and said, "Disciple Jiang Xi is willing to take immortal as my master." Jiang Xi's action caused another commotion. Everyone looked at the Wine Sword Immortal, wondering if this immortal would take Jiang Xi as his disciple. Good, very good. The Wine Sword Immortal nodded lightly. All the cultivators were instantly filled with envy. The news of Jiang Xi successfully becoming the Wine Sword Immortal's disciple quickly spread. The geniuses had just been stimulated once, and this time, they were stimulated again. That was the Wine Sword Immortal, a 9th tribulation transcender who wasn't any weaker than a Tao Immortal. This Jiang Xi is really abnormal. Mu Ning muttered and continued to ponder over his next song. Granny once said that if the Wine Sword Immortal could reverse life and death, he would be a top-notch Tao Immortal. If Jiang Xi can become his disciple, his competitiveness will greatly increase in the future. Yan Jiufeng took a deep breath. Why did he improve so quickly? Kuang Lang couldn't accept this news and was silent for a long time. The other geniuses were even crazier and worked hard to cultivate. However, it wasn't that easy to become the disciple of a tribulation transcender. They had to pass the 3rd trial of the Skyspan Mountain. And it was even more difficult to become the disciple of a powerhouse like the Wine Sword Immortal. It really depended on their mood. Chapter 361. None of the geniuses were willing to fall behind, and they all cultivated diligently. Everyone knew that if they wanted to obtain more resources from the Purple Heavens sect in the future, they had to perform better than others at this time. The 11th to 20th years after entering the ancient Tao origin world were the highlight for Mu Ning and Yan Jiufeng. The two of them passed the 3rd stage of the sky-piercing mountain. On the 21st year, Zhi Wei broke through the 5th stage and took back the limelight. At the same time, Jiang Xi also confirmed a problem during this year. He had sworn an oath to his master, Daoist Gu, that he would return the Purple Heaven Sword Manual to the Purple Heaven sect within 100 years. This 100 years referred to the time he had experienced, and it was not the normal 100 years of the original universe. After the worry in his heart was resolved, Jiang Xi was completely relieved. In the next 21 to 30 years, Kuang Lang, Mo Hong, Blood Child, Li Xianxian, Li Linger, and Feng Lu all passed the 3rd stage. While everyone was breaking through one after another, Riverward remained silent and did not make any movements. He did not challenge the Heavenspan Mountain even once. Although everyone was a little speechless, they were gradually getting used to Jiang Xi's style. In the blink of an eye, there was only a month left. The 30 years of cultivation in the ancient Tao origin world would end. Jiang Xi sat cross-legged on the stone bed in the stone house, seemingly immersed in cultivation. In reality, most of his attention was on his clone on the first moon of Earth. This state had been going on for almost a month. Suddenly, 3 types of Daos of heaven and earth appeared on Jiang Xi's body. The 3 types of Daos circulated in a mysterious way and gradually merged into one. After this process was completed, his aura suddenly increased by several times. Jiang Xi opened his eyes, and a smile appeared on his face. I've finally succeeded. Then, a trace of helplessness flashed through his eyes. As expected, according to Master, each Tao technique is a different path. The more Tao techniques one comprehends, the more paths one can walk at the same time. If one wants to comprehend new Tao techniques, the difficulty will increase tenfold. The master he was referring to was naturally the Wine Sword Immortal in Jiang Xi's opinion. He had deduced the Sword Tao in the first year after entering the ancient Tao origin world. The difficulty of deducing the path of Gale should be much lower. However, he never thought that the difficulty of the deduction was actually greater than the Sword Tao. In addition, the Gale path did not have an inheritance altar as a reference, so the deduction progress was even slower. Jiang Xi did not understand. The Gale Tao was a rare Tao technique. Its difficulty should be lower than other special Tao techniques. Later on, he became the disciple of the Wine Sword Immortal. It was only through this master that he learned that the Wine Sword Immortal had become a disciple of the Wine Sword Immortal. It turned out that it was as difficult as ascending to the heavens to reach a high level of attainment when cultivating multiple Taoist techniques. Especially when one's Tao technique realm was higher, the more difficult it would be to walk the path of multiple Tao techniques. Humans only had 2 legs. Walking 2 paths at the same time was already very difficult, let alone walking 3 or more paths at the same time. In the end, the Wine Sword Immortal also suggested that he focus on Sword Tao. Jiang Xi only listened to half of this suggestion. While focusing on the Sword Tao, he continued to deduce the Gale Tao. He couldn't just say, I have the EXP panel. No matter how many paths there are, as long as I can step on them, I can walk through them, right? Thus, he silently deduced, not caring about the success or failure of the other geniuses. Finally, he successfully deduced the Gale Tao a month ago. The third Tao of heaven and earth. It's indeed very difficult. The ancient Tao source world is like the birth of heaven and earth. The Tao of heaven and earth is not stable, so it's easier to cultivate Tao techniques compared to the original universe. But even in such an environment, it still took me so many years to deduce the Gale Tao successfully. If I were in the original universe, it would probably take me at least 100 years to deduce the third Gale Tao. Fortunately, his efforts were not wasted. When he used his clone to refine the spiritual fruit and push the Gale Tao to perfection, the Tao fusion technique underwent a change. Tao technique, Gale Tao, 10th tier, 50.000/50.000/000. Secret technique, Tao fusion technique, Sword Tao, Fire Tao, Gale Tao, 30.000/300.000/000, amplitude 3. After the 3 Taos of heaven and earth have completely fused, my spiritual energy amplitude has tripled. If that's the case, my spiritual energy amplitude can reach a maximum of 6,000 times. I'll comprehend it carefully and prepare to challenge the Skyspan Mountain. Before leaving the ancient Tao source world, I'll try to comprehend it one last time at the Azure Lotus altar. It was not only the improvement of his Tao technique. In the past 20 years, Jiang Xi had used up 3 chances at the inheritance altar. He had used the Azure Lotus altar to deduce and completely comprehended the second sword technique of the melody of 10,000 swords. His ability to use the Sword Tao had greatly improved. Therefore, before leaving, he wanted to comprehend it one more time to further improve his use of the Sword Tao. New Moon Era 225, November 11th. Original Universe, Milky Way Galaxy, Planet Dongyuan, Mountain Sea Star Trade Headquarters. This day was an important day for the Mountain Sea Star Trade. Yan Fei, a late-stage nascent soul disciple from the Purple Heaven Sect's First Heaven, carried out a complete inspection of the Mountain Sea Star Trade's assets under the witness of the Omniscient Eye. Congratulations, Junior Sister Jiang. The Mountain Sea Star Trade's assets have reached 100,000 supreme-grade spiritual crystals. According to the rules, the Purple Heaven Sect's business-type disciples can run a star trade group. If the assets reach 100,000 supreme-grade spiritual crystals, they can enter the Purple Heaven Sect's First Heaven to cultivate. Yan Fei first said this formally, then smiled and said, Junior Sister Jiang, I will submit the inspection results later. Then we will really be fellow disciples. Then I hope Senior Sister Yan can take care of me in the future. Jiang Daodu smiled. Junior Sister Jiang, you must be joking. With Senior Brother Jiang Xi's status in the sect, I hope you can help me in the future. Yan Fei shook her head. The news that Jiang Xi had become the disciple of the Wine Sword Immortal had already spread in the 9th heaven of the Purple Heaven sect. As for the disciples in the first 4 heavens, other than a few experienced and powerful disciples, the rest were all extremely envious. However, putting aside her relationship with Jiang Xi, Yan Fei also admired Jiang Daodu. She had thought that after the Mountain Sea Star trade was merged into the Purple Heaven sect, she would borrow Jiang Xi's name. It would take Jiang Daodu about 1,000 years to operate the Mountain Sea Star trade to 100,000 supreme-grade spiritual crystals. Unexpectedly, Jiang Daodu achieved this goal in less than 100 years. Even with the excellent quality of the Mountain Sea Star artifact as a foundation, the fact that Jiang Daodu was able to expand the Mountain Sea Star artifact to this extent in such a short period of time was a testament to her abilities. Junior Sister Jiang, when are you going to go to the Purple Heaven sect? Yan Fei asked again. There are still some things to deal with. Let's go in a month, Jiang Daodu said with a smile. Okay, I will wait for you for a month. Thank you. I will ask Yoshin to accompany you around the Milky Way galaxy. Although the two had only met a few times, they were like sisters who had not seen each other for many years and quickly became close. This was partly because Yan Fei deliberately made friends with her, and partly because Jiang Daodu had grown up for so many years and had already understood the ways of the world. After when Yoshin left with Yan Fei, Jiang Daodu stretched lazily as if a burden had been lifted from her shoulders, revealing her graceful figure. Chapter 362. Over 100 years had passed, and the bean sprout who used to roam the streets had become slender and elegant. However, in front of outsiders, Jiang Dudu had always remained aloof. Especially in the past few years when Jiang Xi wasn't around, she rarely smiled. Congratulations, Master. You've finally gotten what you wanted. Yin Tiansheng, who was the size of a thumb, appeared on Jiang Dudu's shoulder. It's still early. The first heaven and the third heaven of the Purple Heaven sect are 2 different worlds. Jiang Dudu's expression was calm. With Master's talent, it's only a matter of time before you enter the 3rd heaven, Yin Tiansheng said with a smile. Jiang Dudu smiled and asked, but you, my brother's master died because of you. Are you afraid now that he's in the Purple Heaven sect? What's there to be afraid of? This old servant has a personal grudge with Taoist Gu. It's not a grudge between the human race and the ghost race. Besides, I'm only a remnant spirit now. I can't catch the attention of those immortal Tao experts. Yin Tiansheng had a smile on his face, but his tone was bitter. Jiang Dudu didn't say anything else. She looked into the starry sky as if there was a world hidden in her eyes. 9 Heaven City, the teleportation platform from the original universe to the ancient Tao origin world. The gray-robed elder guarding this place suddenly opened his eyes. In the next moment, 3 figures appeared at the same time. 2 of them were Immortal Yi Liang and Immortal Chu He. The one in the lead was true Monarch Iron Mountain in blood-red battle armor. When the gray-robed elder saw them clearly, he said in surprise, Iron Mountain, you came personally? I happened to be free, so I brought those little guys back. True Monarch Iron Mountain nodded lightly. This year's youngsters are pretty good. You're really lucky, the gray-robed elder said with a smile. Haha, it's my turn to be lucky. True Monarch Iron Mountain laughed and said a few more words to the gray-robed elder before leaving with Immortal Yi Liang and Immortal Chu He. The gray-robed elder looked at them and shook his head. That lucky guy. After cultivating in the ancient Tao origin world for 30 years, many of the youngsters in this year's 9 Regions Genius Tournament had shown signs of immortal potential. It could be said to be the strongest in 5 million years. True Lord Iron Mountain also had a mansion in 9 Firmament City. He brought immortal Liu Yang and immortal Chuhe to his palace. After taking their seats, True Lord Iron Mountain sat at the top of the hall and asked, "Il Yang, you know the situation of those young people the best. Tell me." Immortal Il Yang said respectfully, "Currently, Zhi Wei has passed the 5th stage of Mount Tongtian. Mu Ning, Yan Jiufen, Jiang Xi, and Kuang Lang are all at the 3rd stage. Mo Hong, Li Xianxian, Lin Ling, and Feng Lu are all in the 2nd stage. The others." He recounted everyone's situation in detail. True Lord Iron Mountain nodded in satisfaction. Under normal circumstances, the young cultivators who participated in the 9 Zones Genius Tournament were all very strong. After cultivating in the ancient Tao origin world for 30 years, it would be considered not bad if 2 or 3 of them could pass the 3rd stage of the Skyspan Mountain. This time, not only did someone pass the 5th stage, there were even 4 people who passed the 3rd stage. If these geniuses were to transcend their tribulation and become immortals in the future, they would have a chance to become powerhouses among tribulation transcenders with a little bit of training. At that time, his Iron Mountain lineage's overall strength in the Tao Alliance's heavenly court would increase by a lot. In addition, Lord Iron Mountain also noticed a problem. He asked with some doubt, "I remember that 20 years ago, Jiang Xi passed the 3rd stage of the Skyspan Mountain and became the disciple of the Wine Sword Immortal, Zhongli. Why hasn't there been any change in the past 20 years? If it was in the original universe, it would be understandable if he hadn't made any progress in 20 years. But now, he had cultivated in the ancient Tao origin world for 20 years and hadn't made any progress at all. Moreover, the Wine Sword Immortal wasn't inferior to him, a Tao Immortal. With such an expert guiding his cultivation, it was reasonable to say that Jiang Xi should have made more progress." Immortal Il Yang and Immortal Chu He looked at each other and laughed. "True Lord, Jiang Xi's style is actually like this. In the 9 Zones Genius Tournament and the Skyspan Mountain 20 years ago, he's always been like this. He likes to hide his strength. He's well prepared." Immortal Il Yang pondered for a while before finding the right words. Then, he briefly described what Jiang Xi had done. True Lord Iron Mountain's interest was piqued. "Oh. Then I'd like to see what he's been accumulating for the past 20 years. Then, he asked Immortal Il Yang to send a message to everyone to meet him. Soon, the remaining 2,700 geniuses all arrived at True Lord Iron Mountain's palace. "Greetings, True Lord Iron Mountain." Everyone bowed in unison. True Lord Iron Mountain was expressionless as a powerful aura spread out. "I'm very disappointed. The ancient Tao origin world is the safest place on your path of cultivation, but almost 1,000 of you have died." The expressions of the geniuses changed under this powerful aura. Even the stronger geniuses like Jiang Xi and Zhi Wei found it difficult to breathe. Too powerful. Now, there's still a month left. Those who are going to challenge the Skyspan Mountain and those who haven't used the opportunity to comprehend the inheritance altar should use it quickly. It won't be so easy to come to the ancient Tao origin world in the future, True Lord Iron Mountain said. These 2 short sentences caused the geniuses to fall silent and quickly disperse. Some returned to the Skyspan Mountain and River diagram to challenge the Skyspan Mountain again. Some went to the inheritance altar to comprehend the ancient Tao origin world first before going to the Skyspan Mountain. Meanwhile, Jiang Xi returned to his stone house and continued to comprehend the changes after the 3 Taos of heaven and earth merged. He received a message from Immortal Il Yang before he had time to check it out, so he could only rush to True Lord Iron Mountain's place. After spending half a day to comprehend, Jiang Xi had a rough understanding of his new strength. After adding the Gale Dao, not only has my spiritual energy multiplied, but the Gale Dao also has the Wind Dao origin world. The Dao fusion technique has also gained some wind transformations, making it faster and sharper. In addition, I've completely comprehended the second sword art of the melody of 10,000 swords. My current strength should be able to improve greatly on the Skyspan Mountain, right? Jiang Xi smiled and took out his communication pearl, preparing to challenge the Skyspan Mountain. However, before he could enter the Skyspan Mountain and River diagram, he received a message on his communication pearl. Mu Ning just passed the 4th trial. Jiang Xi was slightly taken aback. Then, his eyes narrowed. He's starting to show his strength? Since that's the case, let's go challenge the Skyspan Mountain now. Mu Ning's improvement also ignited Jiang Xi's fighting spirit. The Skyspan Mountain and River diagram, the continent where the 44 Skyspan Mountains were located. Jiang Xi had just entered when he discovered that over 1,000 people had already gathered here. They were all waiting in line to challenge the Skyspan Mountain. Hey, Jiang Xi, Mu Ning just passed the 4th trial, and you're already here. He'll definitely say that you're deliberately causing trouble for him, Yan Jiufeng said with a smile. I can't let him be the only one in the limelight. Jiang Xi joked. Soon, Mu Ning's figure flew down from the myriad Skyspan Mountain. He hadn't passed the 5th trial. Sure enough, when he saw Jiang Xi, he immediately shouted, Jiang Xi, you're deliberately causing trouble for me. Can't you come back a few days later? Jiang Xi and Yan Jiufeng immediately burst into laughter. Chapter 363. Just as they were getting excited, whoosh! Another figure appeared. Everyone looked over. It was a young man with a strand of white hair on his forehead. It was Ji Wei. He had also received the news that Mu Ning had passed the 4th level. However, Ji Wei's gaze fell on Jiang Xi, and he took the initiative to ask a question. Jiang Xi, are you confident that you can pass the 5th level? Maybe. Jiang Xi nodded slightly. Ji Wei fell silent again. At this moment, the voice of the mountain guardian sounded. The Green Lotus sky-piercing mountain is free. Those who want to challenge it, hurry up. Upon hearing this, Jiang Xi immediately flew out and went straight to the Green Lotus sky-piercing mountain. I want to see how many things this guy has hidden for 20 years. Mu Ning muttered. Although Ji Wei was expressionless, the look in his eyes had clearly changed. The other geniuses also looked at Jiang Xi's figure and made guesses. After all, Jiang Xi had not challenged the sky-piercing mountain for 20 years. In the 4th level of the Green Lotus sky-piercing mountain, in the illusion. The gatekeeper, who was dressed in battle armor and carried a long sword on his back, actually revealed a rare smile when he saw Riverward. You haven't been here for a long time. Last time, you suffered a crushing defeat. This time, if you don't have a big breakthrough, you won't be able to pass this level. Let's play one round first. Jiang Xi chuckled. He looked very calm on the surface, but his fighting spirit was rising. It was time to go all out. Whoosh! The slaughtering shadow sword was unsheathed, and sword light whistled like a blooming green lotus. Sword chi that blotted out the sky shot out. This time, the sword chi was not only mixed with the dark redly fire sword shadow, but also the swiftness and fierceness of the wind. Suddenly, sword chi filled the sky and swept through the entire space. Whoosh, the fusion of 3 Daos of heaven and earth. The gatekeeper was also shocked. Under normal circumstances, only those tribulation transcender and Dao immortal powerhouses who had stagnated in their cultivation would think of taking the 2nd or 3rd path. It was very rare for cultivators who had not yet become immortals to take multiple paths and be able to complete the fusion of 2 Daos of heaven and earth. As for someone like Jiang Xi, who had reached the level of the Dao of heaven and earth in all 3 paths and was able to fuse them together to execute the Dao fusion technique, it was simply rare to see someone like him in a million years. It was common knowledge that the more Dao arts one cultivated, the harder it would be to cultivate in the future. However, the gatekeeper would not relax his attack just because he was shocked. He snorted coldly, and his soaring sword intent swept out. You want to use this technique to get past me? Don't even think about it. Boom. Boom. The sword light surged, bursting with dazzling and blazing light. Terrifying cracks appeared in the space as the two of them exchanged blows. It was as if the space was about to collapse. However, in terms of absolute strength, the gatekeeper was still at a disadvantage. In this round, his Dao power was only equivalent to 4,600 times the spiritual energy amplitude. In comparison, Jiang Xi's spiritual energy amplitude could reach 6,000 times. On top of that, after mastering the second sword technique of the tune of 10,000 swords, his combat skills were no longer the same as before. Therefore, the gatekeeper was only able to block Jiang Xi's first wave of attacks. In the second round, he was cut down by the sword. Stage 4, passed. When the news spread, everyone's shock was not as strong as imagined. Because Jiang Xi had already passed the third stage 20 years ago. If he could not even pass the fourth stage this time, it would be too ridiculous. Now, everyone was waiting to see if Jiang Xi could pass the fifth stage. If he could, it would really be heaven-defying. Because the first place of the 9 Regions Genius Tournament, Ji Wei, was also at the fifth stage. The Void Universe Sky-Piercing Mountain is also empty. Those who want to challenge it, hurry up and go. The voice of the gatekeeper sounded. Everyone's eyes gathered on Ji Wei. Ji Wei was expressionless. He moved his feet lightly and flashed out. He would not let anyone shake his first place. This is great. The limelight has been stolen by these two. Mu Ning grabbed the bamboo flute and knocked on his straw hat. Half an hour later, the gatekeeper suddenly laughed. Jiang Xi has passed the fifth stage. Whoosh! The geniuses immediately became lively. This time, everyone was really shocked. At the fifth stage of the sky-piercing mountain, Jiang Xi's talent and strength were fully deserving of the second place this time. Why was he not first? Because Ji Wei had passed the fifth stage 10 years ago. Naturally, he was first. Just as everyone was discussing this matter, the gatekeeper's dignified face was filled with a smile. Ji Wei has passed the sixth stage. The platform in front of the sky-piercing mountain was strangely quiet. The geniuses all fell into silence. The sixth stage. At this time, there was only a deep pressure in everyone's heart. Jiang Xi and Ji Wei were no longer on the same level as them. The other geniuses in the top 10 had their eyes flickering. They were greatly stimulated. Especially the other two Purple Heaven Sect fourth-layer disciples, Yan Jiufeng and Kuang Lang. Yan Jiufeng was slightly better. She was lively by nature. She only smiled bitterly for a moment before her emotions returned to normal. Kuang Lang was originally a domineering person. With such a big gap between him and his competitors, he did not feel good. However, this time, Kuang Lang did not have a big emotional reaction. He was very calm. He had already accepted this reality. However, he would not give up. The road of cultivation was still long. He would catch up sooner or later. He would not give up. Next, the geniuses' challenges came to an end. Basically, everyone had passed the first stage. As for the top 360 geniuses, as long as they were still alive, they had passed the second stage. After that, only the top 10 geniuses had passed the third stage. The remaining geniuses, the fourth stage, Mu Ning. The fifth stage, Jiang Xi. The sixth stage, Ji Wei. Inside True Monarch Iron Mountain's palace. The three immortals had also received the results of everyone's challenge. Congratulations, True Monarch. Immortal Yu Yang and Immortal Chu He congratulated him in unison. True Monarch Iron Mountain, who had always been dignified, also let out a carefree laugh. It could be expected that Ji Wei, Jiang Xi, and Mu Ning would all become powerhouses among tribulation transcenders in the future as long as nothing unexpected happened. If they were lucky, they might even become great Dao immortals. If they became tribulation transcenders, they would naturally be his subordinates. If they became great Tao immortals, they would become true monarchs. They would be on the same level as him, and would not be inferior to him. However, at that time, their relationship would definitely be closer than that of other true monarchs. However, he still had some doubts in his heart. Ji Wei walks the path of time and space, and he has already stepped onto the great Tao. Coupled with the fusion of time and space, it is reasonable for him to pass the sixth stage. Mu Ning is also at the great Tao level, and he specializes in the great Tao of life. He has walked further than Ji Wei's great Tao. What is this Jiang Xi relying on? He has not stepped onto the great Tao, but instead walked 3 great Taos of heaven and earth at the same time. It is really rare. After thinking for a while, he shook his head. Weren't geniuses like this? It was beyond the expectations of ordinary people. 3 people, 3 different cultivation directions. At present, it seemed that Ji Wei was a little ahead. However, in the eyes of true monarch Iron Mountain, Jiang Xi was also a genius worth looking forward to. This was because Ji Wei had already revealed a talent that was rarely seen in a million years. In contrast, Jiang Xi's sudden breakthrough was a complete surprise. Chapter 364. After failing the 6th stage, Jiang Xi didn't continue trying and left the sky-piercing mountain river diagram. He cultivated in the stone house for 3 days. After the 3 battles in the sky-piercing mountain, he gained a lot of battle insights and needed to organize them. Only by summarizing and combining actual battle and theory could he improve faster. After doing all that, Jiang Xi went to the Azure Lotus altar and cultivated for 20 days, using up the 2 chances he just obtained. Because just like true monarch Iron Mountain said, if he didn't use it now, he didn't know when he would come to the ancient Tao source world again. Using the Azure Lotus altar, he used the Purple Firmament Sword Manual, Sword Tao, and Melody of 10,000 Swords to deduce together. Combined with the battle insights from the sky-piercing mountain, his use of the Sword Tao improved a lot after 20 days. Especially the 3rd sword technique of the Melody of 10,000 Swords, he already had a rough idea. Presumably, if he continued to deduce with the experience panel, he would soon be able to fully grasp it. The 3 sword techniques of the Melody of 10,000 Swords corresponded to the first 3 transformations of the Azure Lotus Sword Tao, 1 Azure Lotus, 4 Azure Lotus, and 100 Azure Lotus. Once he fully grasped the 3rd sword technique, his strength would definitely rise to another level. 9 Firmament City, Wine Sword Immortals Palace. Jiang Xi spent the last 10 days before leaving the ancient Tao source world. Listening to the teachings of his master, Wine Sword Immortal, was one thing. Another thing was that he didn't know when he would come to the ancient Tao source world again after leaving this time, so he naturally wanted to accompany his master. In Jiang Xi's heart, Daoist Gu and the Wine Sword Immortal, these 2 masters, had completely different styles. But they were both dedicated to their disciples and taught them everything. Before Daoist Gu died, he directly passed his inheritance memories to him. And the Wine Sword Immortal, in the 20 years after he became his master, carefully taught him about various aspects of cultivation. In the last 10 days, the Wine Sword Immortal even told him many things. He provided many constructive suggestions for his future development. Soon, it was time to leave the ancient Tao source world. Master, I'm leaving. Jiang Xi knelt on the ground. As sword immortals, there's no need for us to go through such complicated formalities. We can just do as we please. Wine Sword Immortal laughed out loud riverward, on the other hand, bowed respectfully. Even though the Wine Sword Immortal had lived for nearly 100,000 years, his heart was inexplicably moved. Because he had entrusted too many things to Jiang Xi. Jiang Xi, since we are parting, I have a request for you. The Wine Sword Immortal said seriously. Master, please speak. Wine Sword Immortal said, live on. Jiang Xi was startled for a moment. He thought that the Wine Sword Immortal had some requirements for his cultivation. Unexpectedly, there were only 3 simple words. But from these 3 words, one could feel the Wine Sword Immortal's concern for him. This disciple will remember. Jiang Xi took a deep breath. Alright, you guys are about to gather. Hurry up and go. Wine Sword Immortal laughed. Jiang Xi nodded gently, then turned and left. In the empty hall, the Wine Sword Immortal stood there quietly. After a long time, he suddenly grabbed the wine gourd and drank a lot of wine. Immortal Ping walked out of the side hall and sighed. Big brother Zhongli, since you can't bear to part with him, you can apply to return to the sect to cultivate. This way, Jiang Xi's path in the sect will be smoother. The Wine Sword Immortal shook his head and smiled. The growth of young people still needs more tempering. Don't worry, this little guy is smart and has hidden a lot of things. Jiang Xi left with worry in his heart. Although the Wine Sword Immortal didn't reveal the problem of his lifespan to him, he had checked the information of the Wine Sword Immortal a long time ago. His master was a 9 Tribulation Sword Immortal who had lived for nearly 100,000 years. In other words, the Wine Sword Immortal's lifespan was about to come to an end unless he could break through and become a great Tao Immortal. I don't know what happened, but with Master's strength, he should have been able to become a great Tao Immortal. Jiang Xi shook his head and hid his worry in the bottom of his heart. He still wasn't strong enough. It was very difficult for him to come into contact with the secrets of the Tribulation Transcender and Great Tao Immortal levels. 9 Heavens City, the teleportation platform from the original universe to the ancient Tao origin world. True Monarch Iron Mountain stood with his hands behind his back, while Immortal Yu Yang and Immortal Chu He stood behind him. More than 2,700 geniuses were standing in an orderly manner. The cultivation in the ancient Tao origin world is over. There are only 3 people whose performance satisfied me the most, Ji Wei, Jiang Xi, and Mu Ning. True Monarch Iron Mountain's hoarse voice sounded. Instantly, the gazes of the geniuses gathered on the 3 people at the front. Everyone had complicated expressions. Some were disappointed, some were envious, some were jealous, but most of them were filled with fighting spirit. Ji Wei, Jiang Xi, and Mu Ning. In many people's eyes, Jiang Xi was actually more monstrous than the other 2. This was because Jiang Xi's growth was too fast. Ji Wei and Mu Ning's talent and strength had already been displayed in the 9 Regions Genius Tournament. In comparison, although Jiang Xi was in the top 10 at that time, he was clearly weaker than Ji Wei and Mu Ning. Moreover, Jiang Xi's master was only a Tribulation Transcender, while Ji Wei and Mu Ning's masters were Tao Immortals. 30 years had passed, and Jiang Xi had risen step by step. He had surpassed Mu Ning and was approaching Ji Wei. In the future, how far could Jiang Xi go on the road of cultivation? No one had a definite answer. However, no one dared to underestimate Jiang Xi now. True Monarch Iron Mountain continued, the 30 years in the ancient Tao origin world was only the first stage of your cultivation in the Purple Heaven sect. Resources are earned by one's own efforts. I hope that after arriving at the Purple Heaven sect, you can continue to work hard and perform even better. Cultivation has no limits. How far you can go in the future is not only related to your talent, but also how much effort you can put in. Now, follow me back to the Purple Heaven sect. The geniuses became excited once again. As disciples of the Purple Heaven sect, they could finally cultivate in the Purple Heaven sect. Jiang Xi had a deep look in his eyes. He had thought about more than the others. Strictly speaking, he was already a disciple of the Purple Heaven sect after he became Daoist Ji's disciple. Now, he really had to go to the Purple Heaven sect. Where would he go, and what would he experience? His sharp intuition told him that Daoist Ji's mission was not that simple. The Tao Alliance's 3 gates and 6 sects, the Taoist Gate, the Buddhist Gate, and the Sword Gate, were detached from worldly affairs. The Purple Heaven sect was the true ruler of the entire Tao Alliance and the entire human race in the universe. After all, even the master of the Tao Alliance's heavenly court came from the Purple Heaven sect. One could imagine how powerful the Purple Heaven sect was. The Purple Heaven Sword Manual was named after the Purple Heaven sect. Its importance was self-evident. However, Taoist Gu, a Tao integration expert, had mastered one of the most important inheritances of the Purple Heaven sect. Was this a joke? Looks like I have to keep a low profile when I reach the Purple Heaven sect. I can only secretly look for opportunities. Jiang Xi carried these doubts, caution, and worry in his heart as he followed the three immortals. First, they teleported back to the Tao Alliance Heavenly Court's Tao Origin Hall through the Universe Passage. Then, they teleported directly to the Purple Heaven sect's headquarters through the Southern Heavenly Gates teleportation platform. They had finally arrived. The geniuses were once again stunned by the scene before them. Chapter 365. As soon as the 2,700 geniuses appeared on the teleportation platform of the Purple Heaven sect, they were all stunned. The headquarters of the Purple Heaven sect was naturally not something that a peak immortal Tao sect could compare to. However, what they didn't expect was that this was also a continent in space. It was so vast that one couldn't see the end of it. In terms of scale, it was comparable to the Tao Alliance's Heavenly Court. The only difference was that the continent of the Tao Alliance's Heavenly Court had countless immortal mountains, immortal islands, and palaces. On the other hand, the Purple Heaven sect only had 9 enormous floating islands. They were layered upon layers, and they were surrounded by 5 colored clouds. It was like a paradise. Right now, the teleportation platform they were on seemed to be tens of thousands of square kilometers in size. However, compared to the 9 floating islands, it was nothing. While everyone was still in shock, True Monarch Iron Mountain said in a low voice, "Hyang, Chuha, take them to their respective heavens." Then, he disappeared from the teleportation platform. Immortal Ilyang and Immortal Chuha glanced at the youths who were looking around, then exchanged a glance and chuckled. Then, Immortal Ilyang said, "The continent below is slightly smaller than the Tao Alliance's Heavenly Court's Heavenly Court continent. The largest one has a diameter of 9 billion light-years. It is where the outer disciples of the Purple Heaven sect cultivate. These 9 enormous floating islands are the 9 great heavens. The first 4 heavens are where the core disciples cultivate. Each of them contains a major world. 9 billion light-years. That was a little too small. The geniuses were all flabbergasted. Now, the disciples of the first heavens will follow Immortal Chuha. The disciples of the second and third heavens will follow me." Immortal Ilyang chuckled. The 2,700 geniuses quickly split up according to their respective heavens. The first heavens were the most numerous, followed by the second heavens. The third and fourth heavens were only the top 10. Everyone would be teleported to the first 4 floating islands in the sky through the teleportation platform in batches. Immortal Chuha left with the first heavens, which had the most people. Then, Immortal Ilyang left with the fourth heavens, Ji Wei, Yan Jiufeng, and Kuang Lang. As for the several hundred second and third heavens geniuses, they had to wait for Immortal Ilyang's return because the heavenly layer world was very big. The 2 immortals had to send these geniuses to their respective caves one by one. Before leaving, Yan Jiufeng waved at Mu Ning and Jiang Xi. "Mu Ning, Jiang Xi, don't forget to keep in touch." Although she was lively by nature, the only people she was close to were Mu Ning and Jiang Xi. Of course, Jiang Xi was incidental. Mu Ning tilted her head and waved her flute. Jiang Xi only smiled and nodded. He knew that the other party was targeting Mu Ning. "I wonder what the world of the third heaven is like?" Mu Ning asked curiously beside Jiang Xi. He was also a disciple of the third heaven. Just now, the immortal said that it's a great world, Jiang Xi said with a smile. In Taoist GE's Inherited Memories, there was a simple description of the 9 heavens of Purple Heaven sect, but it was not detailed. Jiang Xi had no idea what was going on inside. Mu Ning kept making guesses, and Jiang Xi would add on occasionally. No matter what the environment is inside, I'll definitely plant a willow tree in front of the door and dig a pond. Mu Ning calculated carefully. Jiang Xi smiled and was about to speak when he suddenly sensed something. He turned around abruptly and shuddered. "Brother!" A familiar voice that seemed to penetrate deep into his soul reached Jiang Xi's ears. Jiang Duda's graceful figure appeared on the other side of the teleportation platform. She, who had always maintained a cold demeanor in front of others, was now smiling like a blooming flower. Jiang Xi was instantly dumbfounded. The world seemed to have quieted down. The two of them only had eyes for each other. They had really been separated for a long time this time. Jiang Xi had been separated for 30 years, while Jiang Dudu had been separated for 108 years. Jiang Dudu's appearance also caused the other geniuses on the teleportation platform to become lively. Since the two immortals, Yi Liang and Chu He, had temporarily left, they could finally relax. "Jiang Xi, you actually have a younger sister," Mu Ning exclaimed. "Why is your sister also a disciple of the Purple Firmament sect?" Mo Hong asked. "This is ridiculous. Your sister's talent is also so strong." The other geniuses who were on good terms with him all teased him. Jiang Xi smiled proudly and appeared in front of Jiang Dudu in a flash. "Are you surprised?" Jiang Dudu asked. "Yes, I'm happy." Jiang Xi nodded with a smile. But before he could say anything, 2 more figures appeared on the teleportation platform. The aura of an immortal Tao powerhouse suddenly spread out and enveloped the hundreds of geniuses in the 2nd and 3rd firmament. The powerful aura caused everyone's faces to turn pale as they resisted with all their might. It gave them the feeling that if they didn't resist, they would only be waiting for death. Jiang Xi also hurriedly spread out his spiritual power and Tao arts to protect himself and Jiang Dudu. At the same time, he was puzzled. What was this? Were they trying to intimidate them while immortal Yi Liang and immortal Chu He were not here? Were immortal Tao powerhouses that bored? One of the 2 figures could be seen, one was tall and the other short. The tall one was a middle-aged man with a stiff face and wore a purple Taoist robe. The short man had a strange face and held a compass in his hand. While the hundreds of geniuses were resisting with all their might, some were even at a loss. The short immortal with the compass glanced at the compass, then raised his head and pointed. "It's him." He was pointing in the direction of Jiang Xi and Jiang Dudu. Jiang Xi's expression changed drastically. The stiff-faced immortal in the purple Taoist robe appeared in front of the 2 of them as if he had teleported. "You've learned the Purple Firmament Tao without permission. Die." He spoke in a tone as if he was passing judgment. He stood high above and grabbed at Jiang Xi. Jiang Xi wanted to move, but under the restraints of the immortal Tao powerhouse, he could not move at all. He could not even change his expression. However, at that moment, an undetectable cold light flashed across Jiang Dudu's body. She broke free of the restraints and stood in front of Jiang Xi. "Don't you dare hurt my brother." Jiang Xi's eyes were filled with anxiety and despair. He wanted Jiang Dudu to dodge. His heart was filled with bitterness. He was really going to die this time. "Stop." Suddenly, a loud shout rang out. Another middle-aged woman appeared on the teleportation platform. She had an ordinary face, but there was a galaxy of stars in her eyes. "Humph." The stiff-faced immortal snorted coldly and continued to grab at Jiang Xi. The female immortal wanted to stop him, but she was too slow. At that critical moment, immortal Yi Liang appeared on the teleportation platform. He had just returned after sending off Ji Wei, Yan Jiufeng, and Kuang Lang. "How dare you!" Immortal Yi Liang was enraged when he saw this. He slammed his palm down. The tall and short immortals did not dare to be careless. They immediately raised their hands to block. The female immortal took advantage of this opportunity to appear in front of Jiang Xi and protect Jiang Xi and Jiang Dudu. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.